September 26th, 2022 meeting of the Planning Commission to order. May we have roll call, please?
David Dahl.
Here.
Margaret Moran.
Here.
Craig Sutton.
Here.
Colleen White.
Here.
Justin Lehrman.
Here.
Emily Stouffer.
Here.
Nicholas Andrews.
Here.
Okay, I'm going to begin by just giving you an overview of how it works. Planning Commission meetings are quasi-judicial in nature. All decisions of the Commission will be based on competent substantial evidence, including testimony provided at this meeting. Any person who is not an applicant or agent that wishes to speak will need to fill out a speaker's card located on the side table by the corner, by the door, and turn them into the clerk. Each member of the public will be given 3 minutes to speak on each item. Please refrain from speaking from the audience or applause or cheering or any of those things. We try to keep it all very respectful, and we appreciate you doing it as well. And please silence your cell phones. So with that, may we look at the approval of the minutes, please?
We don't have any minutes for this meeting now.
Okay. Do we have any correspondence?
I think there were a couple of emails we received.
Sure. Good evening, Heather Ireland, Director of the Planning Department. We received 2 emails today in regards to items B and C on your agenda. They are on the top of the stack I handed you prior to the start of the meeting. There are several other emails underneath that stack that we received back last August and December. I gave you copies again anyway, just so you would have the full extent of all the correspondence we received in regard to that item, for those 2 items.
Thank you. Do we have any old business?
We do not.
Well, then may we begin with new business, please.
The first item on your agenda is PC 22-22. It's a request for conditional use approval. The owner is Janelle Wilson. The applicant is James McGuyan. The property is located at 3016 South 3rd Street, Unit 202. The request is for conditional use for a personal service tailored alteration shop in the CPO zoning district. The subject property is a small commercial structure predominantly used for office located along 3rd Street South. The property is located in a small area of CPO zoning district along the west side of 3rd Street South between St. Augustine Boulevard and 33rd Avenue South. The subject property has a small parking area in the rear with parking spaces that meet the parking requirements for office use and 2 additional spaces that will accommodate the change in use of personal service. The business has been located in Jacksonville Beach for many years and recently moved to this location. The demand for parking for this type of use is low, and there is no anticipated excess noise or traffic that will be generated. The business will operate during normal business hours. Adjacent uses are multifamily to the west, office use to the north and south, and single family across 3rd Street to the east. The proposed personal service use is consistent with the CPO zoning standards and is consistent with the surrounding commercial and multifamily adjacent uses. Based on the provided application and analysis stated in the report, the Planning and Development Department recommends approval of PC 22-22.
Thank you, Mr. Copley. As a reminder, each member of the public will be given 3 minutes to speak when we open the public hearing. Does any member of the board have any ex parte communication to disclose? Thank you.
I do. I had a text from Ken Marsh and an email
This is on
from,
the first item.
oh, okay, never mind.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to address us and give any presentation, or applicant's representative, or it's not required, but we'd be interested in hearing if you'd like to speak to us, Ms. Wilson.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilson, can you raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record?
Yes, Janelle Wilson at 2014 South Ocean Front, Jacksonville Beach, Florida.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Is there anything you'd like to share?
I'm not the applicant, and I did not know that the lieutenant had applied for this variance until I saw the large sign in the yard when I drove up to the office one day. And then I didn't get any further communication until late Friday afternoon, and an email saying that I needed to be here at 7 o'clock tonight. So, I did not make the application, but I do own the building, and I've been there for a couple months. I didn't realize that it wasn't conforming when I rented to them, because there's a beauty shop next to the north and attorney's offices. And then there's the doctor's offices to the south and a bank. So it's seems to be in line with the surrounding area. So if you have any other questions, but I don't know where the applicants are. So
Thank you very much. Do we have any discussion? I will open the public hearing. We don't have any speaker cards? Madam Vice Chair. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak? Well, then I'll close the public hearing and bring the item back to the board for discussion. Do we have discussion, or do we have a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
May we have roll call, please?
David Dahl,
Yes.
Greg Sutton,
Yes.
Colleen White,
Yes.
Justin Lehrman,
Yes.
Margaret Murray.
Yes. Moving on to the next item, please.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Again, Heather Ireland, Planning and Development Director. Madam Chair, if it pleases you and the Planning Commission, I'd like to cover both items B and C together as far as staff presentation. I assume that the applicant will want to do something similar, although we will have to open, as we discussed, a separate public hearing for each and then a vote for each. So I know for everybody in the audience who wants to speak, I know we'll have a lot of people speaking on both items or one or the other. So we'll just kind of see how that goes when we get to the speaker portion. I know we've had some training in the past, but one thing I wanted to just quickly do for both y'all's sake and everyone that's here for these items is just kind of really briefly discuss over 30,000 feet, what the comprehensive plan and the land development code do and how they're linked and how they tie back to these requests for a small scale land use amendment and a rezoning for the property that is currently Adventure Landing. So I'll go over these really quickly so we can get to the application. The comprehensive plan is the guiding document that guides future growth for a community. It includes things like the future land use element, housing, transportation, recreation, open space, conservation, and also includes what's called a future land use map that is the community has the ability to amend. We haven't amended it here in a very, very long time. Land use map amendments of less than 50 acres are considered a small-scale amendment per Florida statute, which is a new rule. I believe that was 2021. And our current comprehensive plan version is from 2011, and it's had some periodic updates over time just to maintain our statutory compliance as new rules are issued by the state of Florida. Kind of that next step down is our land development code, which serves to implement the comprehensive plan and the goals, objectives, and policies within. It's currently consistent or mostly consistent with the comprehensive plan. I know we're looking to change both of these documents in the next coming 18 months. The type of things that are in the land development code, as some of you already know, are allowable uses, densities, and intensities of land. But it does allow an opportunity for creative uses of land through either a plan development zoning or RD redevelopment zoning. Tonight we'll be talking about the PUD zoning category. And it also includes processes and standards to change both the comprehensive plan, future land use map, text of the land development code, and also zoning districts. And our current land development code, I think someone called it geriatric or elderly. It is from 1991, which doesn't sound like that long ago, but we are looking to make hopefully substantial changes to it. But it has had updates over the last 30 years to kind of keep up with the times, if you will. All right, so I'm going to skip to talking about the applications at hand. PC 1221, and yes, that's 2021, and 13-2021, we did not discuss last year. It was deferred by the applicant, so we did not provide a presentation to you, which is what we're doing at this point in time. PC 1221 is the small-scale land use amendment component, and 1321 is that rezoning piece. So I'm going to cover the history of the property and a summary of the requests that the applicant is asking for. So this, the title of this project is the Beach Boulevard Mixed-Use Neighborhood Center. That was a title given by the applicant. As we all know, the property's been a theme park since the mid-1990s. The property sold to a new owner in 2021 for the project that's being requested, or the theme park, as we know, has still been operational during this time. The city hosted 2 public workshops in June and August of 2021. The original applications were submitted for future land use changes and a rezoning. They were requesting 427 apartments at that time. And due to staff's proposal and recommendations on the applications, the applicant actually requested to defer in December of 2021 to work on some of those issues. And again, that was a deferral at the request of the applicant. So I want to cover some of the changes from the original application that I know some of you saw, but some of you didn't, just so we're all on the same page. The applicant, one of the changes that they've made to this project is that they have applied to and received approval from FEMA to remove a portion of the property out of the special flood hazard area. This included both shaded X and AE flood zones to allow them to free up a small area of additional property for potential development. And the request was based on existing conditions of the property, and I have a flood zone map on another slide I'll show and just kind of explain that a little bit more. It was primarily shaded X, which doesn't fall under our flood zone ordinance, but AE does. They also revised the site plan to require, or to provide, the required 50-foot upland buffer between development and existing wetlands. And something else new to this amended application is that the project contemplates a small element of supporting commercial, not to exceed in the current proposal 5,000 square feet total. So this is the flood zone map, and I apologize, the colors aren't that great on the screen, but all of this pink area is shaded X, so our flood ordinance does not apply, and the yellow as well. It's these blue areas that are flood in the AE flood zone, have a certain elevation that have to be built to, and our comprehensive plan states that density will not be increased in these flood zones. So you'll see in a later slide, the applicant has moved around their site plan, excuse me, to get buildings out of these blue zones. Okay, so the project summary. What's being proposed is development on 10.9 acres of project area at a density of 40 units per acre, which is allowed by the comprehensive plan. Still 427 multifamily dwelling units are being proposed, in addition to 1,800 square feet of commercial, and in this current form is being proposed a coffee shop with the potential for 5,000 square feet of aggregate commercial. That would be the maximum as is being shown. Could include things like retail, office, personal service, child daycare, as permitted uses in the project. The applicant has also proposed to set aside some property in the northwest corner for some sort of welcome to Jack's Beach sign. Details of that have not been worked out. So to summarize what it is that they're requesting as far as the changes to land use and the changes to zoning. So the first request is to change 7.66 acres of community commercial land use to high density residential. The next request is to change 3¼ acres from recreational open space to high density residential. And then 2.15 acres of commercial to recreation open space, 0.14 acres of commercial, and 0.31 acres of high density residential to recreation open space, and 18.8 acres of low density residential to conservation. The total project size is just under 54 acres. And I have some maps I'll show you to kind of go along with that. So this is the property location where the current development exists. You can see outlined here in the bold line. And these are the existing conditions. So obviously Adventure Landing is right here. And they have 2 gravel and grass seasonal parking lots that are in these 2 areas here. Hopefully you can see that. The full property location includes this, which is just over 30 acres of property. Part of it is in conservation land use, part of it is low density residential, and I have a map showing more detail on that later in another slide. And again, just the full property conditions of both the developed portion, the area they want to develop, which I'll show you in another slide as well, and this area here that they want to make entirely conservation. All right, so here's a summary of the existing future land uses, which are commercial, recreation, open space, parcel 2, parcel 6 and parcel 8 is partially conservation, and then this kind of speckled here is low-density residential with some high-density residential over here, kind of off to the side of parcel 6. And these are the existing land uses as they are now in our comprehensive plan. What the applicant is proposing and requesting is that parcel 1 and 2 on this map are high-density residential, while maintaining parcels 4 and 5 as recreation open space, maintaining parcel 6 as conservation, changing parcel 7 to recreation open space, and then changing all of parcel 8 to conservation. So I want to cover the existing zoning as well. The pink is the commercial general C2, so that's where the current Adventure Landing park sits right now. These orange areas are planned unit development. This is where those seasonal grass and gravel parking lots are located, and those were changed both in 99 and 97 to planned unit development to allow that. This kind of yellow color is residential multifamily, and this blue is residential single-family zoning. What the applicant is proposing is making it all planned unit development, where the developable area will be in this general area up here. So this is a slightly different site plan being proposed than what was in the application around about a year ago. Originally, there was a building in this location, and the applicant has completely removed that building from the site plan and clustered the development closer towards the center of the property, freeing this area up for a new stormwater retention pond. Still proposing the same number of units, parking spaces for both the residential and the commercial component, in addition to all the amenities that would go along with the project, and a boardwalk with a viewing platform down here towards the south center of the project. And then up here is where the applicant is proposing some sort of welcome to Jacksonville Beach sign. So staff has done obviously quite a bit of review and analysis on both of these applications, both the land use amendment and the rezoning request. And we've determined, this is kind of our analysis up here, the following things: that what they're requesting is not increasing any density in the flood zone, the designated FEMA flood zones, as was an issue with the previous application. And they've also clustered the development further to provide that required 50-foot upland buffer from the wetlands. We do not feel that the request degrades the internal consistency of the comprehensive plan, and all of those goals, objectives, and policies are outlined in the staff report and in the application. One of the things we looked at was the population projections in the comprehensive plan, and they were a lot lower than what's actually been documented with the 2020 census, indicating to us that there's a larger demand for housing than was anticipated originally when the comprehensive plan was updated last. And again, want to point out that the rezoning application, which is PC 1321, is contingent on the land use being changed. So that's why I'm talking about them together, because they really do go hand in hand. And I think that's my last slide. If you want to save questions till the applicant has had an opportunity to do their presentation, or did you want to ask questions of staff at this point?
Do commissioners have questions for Ms. Ireland right now?
I do. I'm looking at this one, the proposed site plan,
Yes, ma'am.
and where the little walkway is here. Is this going to be opened up as more housing in here, the single-family housing? Is that what that is?
No, ma'am. In fact, part of their proposal is that all this property that this viewing platform would go into would be changed from single-family residential to conservation. So there would not be anything down past that point.
Yeah, I apologize, I do actually have one question. I'm looking at the application, it said this results in a net decrease of 3.76 acres of recreational open space, is that correct?
I'll have to confirm in the application, or I'll defer to the applicant to answer that, so I'll have to look. Yeah, but we'll get an answer to you.
Thank you.
I have one more. How many acres are on parcel 7, or on that parcel 7? That's the little conservation section that I don't see in the map, the proposed
Probably
site.
easier if I do this.
See?
Parcel 7 is 0.31 acres, so that's this little piece that you're asking about right here. Okay.
Other questions, Carl?
Maybe later.
I figured it out.
Okay, well, with that, I will turn it over to the applicant. I know they have some additional things I'm sure they want to add. And then we can open it up for, obviously, additional questions and then public comments. So-
Well, actually, can we do ex parte before we do that? Or does timing matter?
I don't think it matters. Just really turn it back.
Okay, so Ms. Stover, would you like to, just if you have any ex parte to disclose, let's do it now.
Yeah, I spoke with the agent for the applicant about just the history and timing of the project, and then received an email summarizing such.
Thank you. Mr. Paul?
Mr. Deebenow and I have spoken on various occasions over the last year plus. I do have an email from Ken Marsh with regard to the project, and I spoke one time with Mr. Deebenow's client, Mr. Allen, maybe 9 months ago or so.
Thank you. I too have spoken to Mr. Deebenow. I have an email from him, and we spoke last Friday mostly about process. And I did receive a couple of telephone messages from Ken Marsh, which I did not return. I apologize to members of the community, but I tend not to do that.
I received an email from Mr. Devenau and a text from Mr. Marsh.
I think we all received the email from Ken Marsh.
Okay, thank you, everyone. With that, would the applicant please,
Madam Chair, before Steve comes up, I'm going to file a Form 8B for myself, and I'll read the following statement. I currently own a small business that sublets seasonally on this subject property of these above applications. While this business has been in operation for 69 years, since 1954, and operated on 6 different parcels during that period, and while I feel I can vote on this matter with impartiality, I do not desire any perception of conflict or potential litigation that against the city that could result from this commissioner's participation in a vote on said applications. I therefore recuse myself while maintaining my ability to provide discussion and questions.
thank you, Mr. Sutton.
And through the chair, for the city clerk, let the record show that Commissioner Stover's vote will be recorded on these 2 applications.
Okay, would the applicant please come forward to be sworn in and to give us any presentation before I share?
Please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record.
Steve Devenau, 1 Independent Drive, Suite 1200, here on behalf of the applicant.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, thank you so much for the opportunity to come before this body again. I think the staff did a great job of outlining the current situation and what happened during the last several months. As you know, we had 2 big issues that were addressed through this last 8 months, and I want to give you just a quick summary of that. The first one is there was a discussion with the staff and then again at this board regarding the amount of land that was in the flood zone. And then the second issue was regarding the size or the width of the setbacks from saltwater marshes and also freshwater wetlands. As Ms. Ireland indicated, we stepped all the development back 50 feet beyond the buffers that we had previously. after a discussion with the staff, we did that in order to comply with the planning director's interpretation of the code on salt marshes and freshwater wetlands. On the flood zone issues, what we did is we did something a little bit atypical in development, and that is that we went and asked FEMA for an opinion on our flood zone map early. Typically, that would happen after the planning effort takes place. But at Ms. Ireland's request, in order to prove the amount of land that we had outside the flood zone, we first produced a topographic map that showed 10.9 acres of land outside the flood zone. And then we had FEMA confirm that map, and they went through their process, which was basically it's called a LOMA, a letter of map revision, where they confirmed that the site today, even though the map that Ms. Ireland showed, which is this map here, that map was not accurate. And that sometimes happens on parcels that are close to the water. And so FEMA went through the topographic map that we provided and basically showed today what lands are outside the flood zone. It's not as a result of fill, it's not as a result of anything that we've done. It's just that today there are 10.9 acres of lands located outside the flood zone. And so what we did is we committed to the planning director and commit to you today that we would only have 10.9 acres of development on this property. And that results in there being no loss of flood zone in this vicinity. The other thing that we did prior to our last meeting is we had several community meetings. And there were two issues that were brought up at length and multiple times. One was the desire to have some type of retail use inside this proposed development. And the second one was that there would be a boardwalk or a viewing platform or some way to activate the land to the south. And again, as Ms. Ireland observed in response to Commissioner Murphy-White's question, all the property that's located south of Adventure Landing, which is basically the parcel that's down there with the number 0, it's about 32 acres or so. That entire parcel has a mix of land uses. And we're taking all of that property from being split land use from low density residential and conservation to all being in the conservation land use. And that's illustrated here. The parcel there is split between conservation, parcel 8 is split between conservation and low density residential. And then in the proposed land use amendment, everything will go to conservation. And that does quite a few things, but primarily coming, and we'll talk about it in a moment, but again, to address community questions, we've committed to build a viewing platform going south out of the property into the wetlands so that folks can appreciate the wetlands. Now, the other part of that conversation was, why don't we connect it to Shedder Avenue? And we're prepared to allow the city to connect to Shedder Avenue. If the city decides to build a boardwalk down Shedder and into the wetlands so that there's a public connection and a public access, we're willing to do that. We're even willing to have conversations about how that might take place or who might pay for it. But today, we're proposing that we build a platform going to the south. And then we've also added a 2,000 square foot coffee restaurant in the building. It can go up to 5,000 square feet, but what we're asking for in this particular zoning is 2,000 square feet. So again, we met with FEMA, we increased the setbacks, we added a retail use, and we also committed to doing a viewing platform. And all of those things came out of neighborhood meetings and meetings with the staff. Now, there was a question, I think it was Commissioner Lerman that asked about the 3.24 acres. Is that, who just asked about that? I'm sorry, Mr. Andrews, maybe you did, okay. So that number is a net reduction. When you're mixing up all those acreages and 0.3 here and 0.7 there, we're basically asking to reduce the recreation open space by 3.24 acres in order to do high density residential. But there is an increase of 18.8 acres of conservation land after we delete the high density residential and the low density residential. And there's also a reduction of the community commercial category as well. So when you do all those puts and takes on the acreages, what the result is pretty remarkable. And the substance of the email that I sent everybody, I listed a lot of the benefits from this rezoning. I'm going to go over them quickly, just so they're in the record, if that's okay, Madam Chair. And what this really goes to is what's the public benefit of this rezoning and this land use amendment? In order to justify changing land from recreation open space to something else, there's a large number of criteria that you have to meet, which we filed in our application, which the staff agrees that we met those criteria. But in addition, there has to be a public benefit, which again is outlined in our application, and staff agreed with us. But here are the quick results of all of that work. First of all, we have a mixed-use development that has a 40% decrease in developable acres per the comprehensive plan. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a slide that says that?
It's throughout the application. Yeah, I mean, it's basically, if you compare this slide, the number of recreation and open space, 4.22 acres, and conservation land, 38.72, that's 43 acres of recreation, open space, and conservation land. And that 43 acres compared to the existing today, 6.97 acres and 19.78 acres of conservation. That is a 60% increase in conservation. And if you do the same thing on the developable parcels, and you do the math on 7.9 acres of commercial, 0.31 acres of high density residential, 18.8 acres of low density residential, and you compare that to the 10.9 acres of high density residential, just comparing land use to land use, developable versus non-developable, you get a 40% decrease in development acres and a 60% increase in conservation or recreation and open space acres. Does that make sense?
I'm both a visual learner and an audio learner. So if you had your, bullet points on what the public benefit that you're going to present to us, how many points there are and what they are, that would just be easier for me. So I'll just.
Madam Chair,
Okay.
through the chair,
Yes, sir.
I believe the points we're talking about are on page 21 of the exhibit, and they run through.
Okay.
There.
I do want to say that this was a large set of paperwork, and I received mine because I made a special appointment to come see the director on Monday, and she accommodated me and actually printed me a copy. But I don't know how many months you spent on this, but I had 4 days if I didn't work the weekend.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of information in this document, and it starts on page 21 if you want to follow along with what Steve's going to say.
Thank you.
So, in addition to there being a mixed-use development, in addition to there being a 40% reduction in the development acres, and a 60% increase in the conservation and open space acres, the other thing is that there's no impacts to freshwater wetlands, no impacts to saltwater marshes, no impacts to coastal high hazard. There's a viewing platform that's being proposed to open up the access to the conservation land to the south. It also increases housing choices, which, as Ms. Ireland outlined in her presentation, the population growth in Jacksonville Beach has exceeded what was projected in the comprehensive plan. And as a result, there is a need for additional housing options. That's the purpose, as you know, of the rezoning, is to provide an available multifamily housing option. The other thing that this does, and this is pretty cool too, there's also an improvement in stormwater quality. So if you look at today on this project, in the two orange triangles up there, the PUD 99, 760 and PUD 97, 7701, those are the parking lots for the development today. And those parking lots have direct discharge into the salt marshes and into the freshwater wetlands. The oil and grease and everything that comes off the cars that are parked there gets discharged directly into the environment. There's not stormwater management for those two parking lots. They're just gravel lots. And so when this project is developed, that stormwater pond in the lower right-hand corner will treat and detain all of the water coming off of the site before it's discharged, which is a tremendous environmental benefit. in addition to the increased setbacks and the increased buffers, that's a really big deal for the improved quality, the environmental quality of this particular property. Again, if you do the math, and it's all in the application, there's 3 times as much conservation and recreation and open space land. There's 7 times as much conservation land versus development land. Know that these 2 parcels back here, these 2 orange parcels where the parking is today, those are planned as recreation open space, which is nice, but they're actually parking lots. So even though they're planned for recreation open space, there's cars parked there. In our development, everything that's recreation and open space and conservation, which is best shown here, the only thing that resembles development that'll be in any of that land is a viewing platform and a stormwater retention pond. Those are the only 2 things that you might denote as being development. And the stormwater pond, obviously I mentioned the environmental benefits, that's permitted in the recreation open space category, as is the viewing platform. So you're going from not only are you getting more land in the conservation and recreation category, but you're getting better and higher quality acres than we have today in this as a result of this application. There's a 100% reduction in the low density residential category. So that 18 acres that's in parcel 8 is completely going away. You're getting a 100% reduction in low density residential. You're getting a 100% reduction in the community commercial category, which is 7.98 acres. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and why that's significant. You're also getting a 56% reduction in the number of traffic trips based on the development potential of the land use categories. And that's illustrated here in table 1. So if you compare the existing land use categories, which are at the top 3 lines today, that's just the development potential based on the acreages that exist today, you have a daily trip potential of 8,737 cars per day, or 847 cars per PM peak hour. And then at the bottom, you have the proposed land uses, which are RHD and CC. That first set of numbers is the maximum amount. So that's the 3,831 daily trips and 327 PM trips. That's the maximum potential under the comprehensive plan. And then the very bottom one is the further reduction based on the rezoning on the PUD. So when I say that there's a 56% reduction in trips for the land use application, I'm comparing the 3831 versus the 8737. When I say there's a 66% reduction in trips based on the zoning, I'm comparing the 2,950 trips on the very bottom to the 8737, which is the development potential today.
Can you define a trip?
A trip is a car that comes and goes from a site. And when you say PM peak hour, that's during peak hours, typically 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. It's a 2-hour window that they measure that. And these, by the way, these statistics are not, like, we didn't just make these up. These are statistics from something called the ITE Trip Generation Manual. So these are just numbers straight out of a book that a traffic engineer would use to determine the traffic potential for a development. So there wasn't a study done, there wasn't any kind of analysis done. It's really straightforward and very much in black and white. The other thing regarding traffic that we included in our application was FDOT's most recent analysis of traffic capacity on Beach Boulevard. And that's also included in the application, but it basically shows that there is plenty of capacity on Beach Boulevard for not only this development, but frankly for the full development potential if we determined to not do this use and just pursue, for example, a shopping center, which generates, a lot of trips. In fact, today, by right, we could generate a strip shopping center think of a grocery anchored shopping center. And that would generate the third line down. That would generate, based on the acreage we have, which is about 7.98 acres, that would generate 79,800 square feet of retail, which would generate 7,554 daily cars, 282 AM peak hour cars, and 731 PM peak hour trips. So by right today, just make it real simple. Say we're only going to develop the commercial. Forget all the residential that's in the back, all the low density residential, everything else. The strip shopping center that we could do today would generate almost 3 times as much traffic as what we're proposing in our rezone.
Understood. Just to make this clear, though, single-family residential and multifamily on the first instance right there is currently not allowed to be developed, correct?
No, they are permitted to be developed.
Because of this, the St. Johns River water management?
Well, they're currently allowed under the zoning code and the comprehensive plan. But they do have conservation easements over the low-density residential piece. The high-density residential piece obviously is too small. It's 0.31 acres. You can't really do anything with that. But when we measure impacts, we still look at it and we throw it up on the board. And it's something for you to take into consideration. But this is another big deal. That low-density residential piece, which is back here, this 8.8 acres in parcel 8. All those little black dots in parcel 8, that is currently planned for low-density residential. If you look at the maps, the aerial photo here, between the 2 zeros, that's all uplands. So today, we could modify that conservation easement. It would be expensive, but we could modify that conservation easement. We could extend Shutter Avenue. It's a public road, public right-of-way. We could build that road out to that upland area there, and we could build homes. It would be expensive. It would be very time-consuming. But what's important is there would be no public notice. We could modify that conservation easement, and there would be a meeting in Palatka for the St. Johns River Water Management District, and they would publish their own agenda, but there wouldn't be any signs put up, there wouldn't be any letters sent to any of the neighbors. We could modify the conservation easement, build the road, develop homes there, not really anything anyone could do about it. Under our proposal, when we go and we cover that entire piece up with conservation land use, now if we ever try to change it, signs will go up, notice letters will go out, there'll be ads in the Beaches Leader, people will know that, hey, they're trying to change something down there on parcel 8.
But there's also a reason you're not going that way, because it's extremely expensive.
Well, that's absolutely right. Yeah, that's right. And again, in the code, it asks what the public benefits are of the changes. And so we would submit that converting 18 acres of low-density residential and 0.31 acres of high-density residential and making the other changes, that results in all the things I just mentioned, is a public benefit. And we would also submit that the public having public notice of any future changes in the use on this property in parcel 8 also has a benefit. The very last thing I'll mention is that when you look at how this property may be developed in its entirety, and you look at this site plan and the plan of preservation, this whole blue parcel down on the south, what results is that 80% of the site is undeveloped. And 93% of that is contiguous and available for wildlife habitat. And that's a big deal. It's 43 acres that are available for open space and conservation today, which obviously could be changed without any notice if this plan weren't adopted. The last thing I want to share with you just are some elevations of the property. So you've seen versions of this maybe previously in the paper. In the lower right-hand corner, we're reserving a parcel for some type of an entry feature. That's just a representation that the architect put in there. What we would do is we would allow the city council and the community to develop whatever they wanted to do there, and they could develop that into an entry feature or a sign, or maybe it's a mural or a statue. I have no idea, but that's just a representation of a space because when you're coming over the bridge, you know, this is a pretty prominent corner you're gonna see when you come over the bridge and come into the city. This is the view, obviously, from the west, looking back towards, from the east, rather, looking back towards the west. And then I have hard copies of this as well that I'll pass out. And then this is the street level view of that property as well. So with that, I'll stop. I really appreciate your patience listening to me summarize our current applications. With me tonight is Caitlin Taylor, who's here on behalf of Travado, and also Lionel Perez, who's with England, Sims & Miller. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have as this continues on tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Duca. Do we have other questions from the applicant? Seeing none, I'm going to start our hearing. So we encourage you to speak on either item. You know, there's nuanced differences between the underlying comprehensive plan and the land development regulations. Certainly we welcome your comments on any of that. So the first speaker request card I have is from Ms. Linda Compton.
I wasn't speaking.
And who does not, excuse me, Ms. Compton, who does not wish to address this
Thank
question?
you.
Thank you for that clarification.
I did. That's right.
And she had checked that her opposition to the agenda item. Sorry about that, Ms. Compton.
Madam Chair, could we take the attorney from the city of Jacksonville Beach would like to speak to Mr. Sutton.
Okay.
With regards to his
Okay,
property.
so we will break for 3 minutes, and I will use my 3-minute time counter in order to make sure that we're all on the same timeline. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Well, the test program,
Please raise your right hand, state your name and address for the record.
Ken Marsh, 2011, Yale, Avenue, Jax Beach.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
From the very first community workshop over 1 year ago, the concern for myself and many other citizens was what does the additional cars created by this development mean for the quality of life of the current residents? The two issues I bring to you tonight are this. First, the traffic-related study within the application only references vehicle trips on Beach Boulevard. It disregards any reference to our north-south corridor, 3rd Street, South Beach Parkway, Penman Road. We don't know the impact, but we should. In fact, the objective of TE 1.1 of our comp plan says we must, and I quote, maintain an acceptable level of service on all roadways within the city of Jax Beach. Second, the application study doesn't say anything about new volume of cars that will now reside east of the Intercoastal. The study is about trips, not volume. They are two distinct sets of data. Let's assume I build a 79,000 square foot shopping center as shown in the study. Let's assume all the cars going to that shopping center come from Jack's Beach. I haven't added any more vehicles to Jack's Beach or east of the Intercoastal. The cars already exist. They go to the shopping center and they return from where they came. This is not the case here. Assume 1.5 cars per 427 units, and you've got 641 new cars. It's not about adding volume trips up and down Beach Boulevard. It's about adding more cars, period. And not just to Beach Boulevard, but to our entire island city. So what we residents want to know, and what we asked in the first workshop, is will these added cars have any negative impact on us taking our kids to school, going to the doctor, running simple errands? There are no facts contained in the application that say that. I am not opposed to this development if the developer or the planning group or this committee can tell me factually that the roads in and around Jack's Beach, and not just Beach Boulevard, can handle the traffic. If that cannot be said, then I question the information within this application or the application process as a whole. And without this key transportation information, we have no idea if this is consistent with the overall basic goal of LU1, and that is ensuring the quality of life of the residents. To summarize, I believe the facts as I presented show this application inconsistent with spirit and intent of the transportation element of TE 1.1 of our comp plan and the objective of LU1. Thus, my recommendation is to table this application until a proper traffic impact analysis can be done and we can factually support that our current roads have the capacity to take on the new cars throughout Jack's Beach. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please, I did ask that we restrain ourselves. Thank you. Next speaker?
I'm going to start with the ones that I can read. Duke Lewis.
Please raise your right hand, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Duke Lewis, and I live at 18 Thompson Road. I apologize for not having a better prepared statement for you, but let's get started.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Nervously, yes. I apologize for not having a better prepared statement, but I just kind of took some notes based on what I saw in the application. First thing I'd like to talk about is west of the Intercoastal. We have 1,100 apartment units currently under construction within a few miles of this project we're talking about. We can look at just Jack's Beach, but we have to look at those neighbors that are going to start coming our way. We also, as far as fighting for open recreation or for community recreation, we can't live up to that. We're just bars and sand. We have to have places for people to go. I see all these hotels being built. If they're not at the beach, where are they going to go? Are we just pushing them to the town center? Let's have some stuff at the beach for the citizens. I am against this also because it brings no value to any current citizen. It only a dilution of our services and interference in our quality of life. I'm not sure if you guys remember those stickers that went around a while ago that says, hey, I'm a local, we don't cross the ditch. What we do now if we want to go to a bowling alley, we go to St. John's Bluff. And we do now if we want to go to the movies, we go all the way up to Kernan Road. We must fight for have things at the beach for us. As far as saving conservation land, who are we saving it from? Developers like this. If they could have developed that other bit of property, they absolutely would. The point made that it was too expensive to do is why it's not developed today. How many birthday parties can we have per Saturday on the boardwalk? 3 per day. Again, we need to have something for the kids in Jack's Beach to go to. The reason I say this property changed hands in 2021 based on a bankruptcy decision. That's like a lotto ticket. They're hoping you will approve this for them. They didn't go through the zoning process ahead of time like the due diligence that most property buyers do. They said, you know what, we'll buy it and then we'll convince the commission to do it for us. Hours versus peak time. As far as traffic, Adventure Landing, it's kind of sketchy, right? They open up at noon and they kind of close at 8 or 10. How many people are going to try and get to work out of this proposal every morning between 6 and 8 o'clock? There's no extra room for cars on that road. The last thing I would say to you, ask for more, ask for better, and you're our last line of defense, so hold strong. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Live up to it.
Tina Strong. Yeah? No, I'm not speaking. You don't want to speak? Okay, thank you. Opposed? Elaine, Kathy?
Please raise your right hand, state your name and address for the record.
Eileen Campy, 118 12th Ave North, Jack's Beach.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do. I'm going to ditto the last two, but I also want to add, my concern are the kids in schools. We're bringing in all these homes. We don't have enough good education or schooling right here at the beach for our kids. And you're going to bring in more. So I ditto them, but I'm concerned about our schools and our kids.
So, thank you, ma'am.
Rachel Sawyer.
Please raise your right hand, state your name and address for the record.
Hey, my name is Rachel Sawyer. My address is 6761 Long Meadow Circle South.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes.
Thank you.
A lot of my responses are based off what I just heard in this meeting and the proposals on the slides. So it's kind of starting with that. So noting the public use for the community is nowhere comparable to what the Spaces establishment is already being used for, which has benefited the community and Duval County for decades. My concerns are for our longtime community supporters and advocates and owners, what is being proposed to aid the current tenants during this extreme transition. Also the safety measures and security plan, what kind of security is going to be at this apartment complex. It just seems like it could be kind of a grounds for unsafe things to happen there. Reducing vehicle flow means reducing revenue, right? So don't we want those patrons visiting our town? It seems unproductive to build more living spaces when there's more vacant homes than there are homeless people, and there's more and more homelessness happening in our streets every day. Will any of these apartments be designated for Section 8? I haven't heard anything about that yet. Our town doesn't need another complex or strip mall. I think I stand for most of the community when I say that this is a level down move. Thank you. I'm opposed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lynn Hillerman.
My name's Lynn Heilman. I live at 22 Oxon Road.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Living on Hudson Road for 25 years, I've watched this piece be developed into Adventure Landing. I've watched the adjacent piece flip the wetlands to what is now the vacant piece in front of the church. I had the piece personally under contract where the church is, which was zoned residential along Beach Boulevard. Tried to get this board to approve it for a low-density office similar to what Don Cheo is up on the opposite side of Beach Boulevard. I was denied. This board then approved the church on the grounds that it would be a small church and not grow. Now the church owns that big parking lot, so you know that church is going to grow. So this board moves on different actions. Mr. Sutton, Mr. Dahl were both present during all of these changes. The change wasn't given to me on that residential piece because that was on the heels of Home Depot wanting to come in. They were denied because of traffic. And you know, a Home Depot certainly would add traffic according to these studies, but not cars. This will add cars. Ken made a good point and made a point to me also that north-south, we're not talking about, my office is on Penman Road. it's coming up for expansion in 2026. That's gonna be a 2-year project, because that's gonna cause, they're gonna have to do sewer, water, drainage, and everything. Penman Road floods, nearly floods every time we have a torrential afternoon downpour. Not, not less what we're gonna see in 2 days here. So, I mean, I think that it would behoove the board to get an accurate traffic study, not just, a car count or whatever, before they approve this. Because one other thing, the other thing I wanted to say, the board also needs to consider with the rerouting of 19th Street going down to the boat ramp, which was approved as the city of Jacksonville, but that's all for the benefit of the Windward Group, because that property is also slated for 200 or 300 more housing units. Those guys originally, the previous owner was going to do those as condos. The current owner is going to do it as apartments. Those guys are cash flow. They're not going to develop it to sell fee simple townhouses. They're going to develop it with apartments. So you set a precedence here. The people of Windward Group are going to come back and ask you for the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Barbara, Banner, Bauer.
Please raise your right hand and state your name and address for the record. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, it's kind of like. I am here to oppose the staff-approved modified rezoning and future land use application for the for the Adventure Landing project. It is too big at 427 units. The comprehensive plan called for 458 new units between 2011 and 2030. This one development is just 31 units under that number, and I know more than 31 housing units have gone up in Jacks Beach between 2011 and today. So this project is totally out of line with the goals, objectives, and policies outlined in the city's own comp plan. Another pressing issue is the amount of cars these units will add to our streets. While it might be true that Beach Boulevard may be able to handle the increased traffic, I doubt the new residents will limit their travels to up and down Beach Boulevard. I'm pretty sure they're going to be using Penman, 9th, and A1A. The left turn lane on Beach onto Penman already backs up into the left lane, completely backing it up, as does the left turn lane at Beach and A1A. I have seen traffic on 9th Street backed up from the stop sign at 16th Street Avenue South all the way to 8th Avenue South. And this project is not the only one adding cars. The new development at the Marina will also add more cars. A1A and 9th Street have been worked on within the last 10 years. I doubt they can handle another 500 to 800 cars per day. The comp plan in policy LU 1.4.1 states that the city will assess the impact of any new development upon the transportation network to see if they are approaching a capacity deficit. I would like to know if this has been done for all the arterial streets, and if so, what the results are, and if not, I request one be done before approval of any development. And that is a bogus statistic that guy gave, as Ken Marsh said. Commercial traffic trips consist of cars already here. These would be bringing probably 854 new cars to that development if each apartment has 2 cars, which they probably do. The development also seems incompatible with policy LU 1.42 of the comp plan, which calls for housing units to accommodate people of low and moderate incomes and the elderly. My understanding from the presentation last year is this will be an upscale development, which means the people who work here at the beach won't be able to afford them, neither will the elderly on a fixed income. As citizens, we put our trust in you, the Planning Commission, to protect us from future problems like traffic jams and overcrowding, to ensure that Jacks Beach remains a pleasant, affordable, livable community. It actually used to be kind of quirky one with a laid-back vibe and with more bikes than cars around Town Center. People were a lot friendlier. Development is good, overdevelopment is not. Jack's Beach is very much in danger of becoming another overdeveloped, overcrowded, overpriced beach community with no local character whatsoever. It is not the type of community I moved to or want to live in. And I would
Can I ask
also
you to wind
say,
it up, please?
yeah, one more thing. That lawyer stated that one of the benefits of this project was 100% reduction in low-density zoning. I don't consider that a benefit, a change from low-density zoning to high-density zoning. So I would ask that you reject the zoning request and the land use amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Our last speaker is Joe. I don't know how to read your last name.
McConville.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Please raise your right hand, state your name and address.
Joe McConville, 619 14th Avenue North.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. So, I'll be quick. I definitely oppose as well. I feel like no part of this whatsoever benefits the beach and its residents. It says there's I don't understand how that pond is gonna help, with the oil and gas when you're gonna add, again, 854 cars. And anyone that says that each place isn't gonna have 2 cars is full of crap. There's gonna be 2 cars, guaranteed. Other than that, develop it the way you bought it. You jumped in, you bought it, you have it, do what it's zoned for. I mean, tough guy tactics, I'll do this, I'll put a road through, Cheddar. You're not gonna do that because it's not cost effective. So don't threaten. Do what you did with it. You bought it, develop it that way.
Is there any other member, I'm sorry, any other member of the audience that would like to speak? Still, the speaker card. Okay, I'd just kind of like to ask procedurally, should we go with questions to the applicant and then open another public hearing, or is there a best way to do it?
I think we can leave that up to your preference. If you want to close the public hearing for PC 12-21 and open it up again for anyone else who wishes to speak. I think everybody kind of talked to both, but there might be some additional comments that the public has.
Okay.
If I could, just to be clear, I want to make sure that the applicant's given time for rebuttal in the context of both applications or both public hearings. So I'm fine if you have a public hearing for the land use amendment next, but I just want to make sure that when I am given the opportunity for rebuttal that it applies to both applications. I'm not going to say the same thing twice, in other words, one on the rezoning and one on the land use amendment application.
Understood. So do you want to ask the applicant questions now, and then we'll open the public hearing for any other comments that we missed?
I would love these rebuttals.
Okay.
Too.
So have you heard that? Questions for the, I'm closing the
Well,
public hearing on the land use.
I think the public hearing is still open for my rebuttal.
Okay.
And then you can close the public hearing on this one for questions, and then we reopen the public hearing for the next application.
Yes.
And I'm not going to repeat myself unless there's new information. I'll do my best to limit my comments. Anyway, so again, Steve Evenow, just very broadly, and I really want to address the very last comment first. We're not threatening to do something other than what we're trying to provide context to the applications. So what we're trying to do is to demonstrate that there are other options available. And our other option available, and the one that I really would like you to focus on and think about, is the third line down here in this application, which is CC 820 Shopping Plaza, 40 to 150,000 square feet. That can be done by right today as a shopping center. And this property is going to be developed for something. Adventure Landing is going away the end of this year. Their lease is expiring. My client owns the land. That lease is not going to be renewed. And so there is something else coming besides Adventure Landing. And yes, if we're forced to play the hand that we're dealt, which we knew, my client knew when he bought the property, then it will be developed as a shopping center. Because the property is not going to stay as Adventure Landing. So just by comparison, and again for context, 79,000 square feet of shopping center plaza leads to 3 times or more traffic than what's being proposed today. And again, I'm not threatening, because we'd really much rather do the apartments in the mixed-use community rather than the shopping center. But the use, you get the point. It's going to be something later. Let's continue though talking about traffic. As you sit in a quasi-judicial position, your question is whether or not there was competent substantial evidence to support the applicant's position. And the applicant has provided an application that includes Table 1, which is up here, as well as Exhibit J, which is the current traffic counts on Beach Boulevard from FDOT. Again, not our numbers, they're publicly available numbers from FDOT. And it shows that Beach Boulevard will not reach capacity even in 2045 with current projected growth. So for the next 25 years or 24 years, there's not going to be an overcapacity situation on Beach Boulevard based on DOT's numbers. And in response to that, the staff report, the application, the data from Table 1, the data from the IT Trip Generation Manual, the data from FDOT, that's competent substantial evidence in support of our position. And the response has been what courts characterize as generalized concerns of the neighborhood. Those are just general concerns about traffic. 1.25 parking spaces is Mr. Marsh's best guess. 2 parking spaces per unit is Mr. Joe's, I can't remember his last name. McConville's, that's his best guess. By the way, we are providing 2 parking spaces per unit because that's what code provides, that's what code requires. But again, you've got competent substantial evidence regarding traffic versus generalized concerns. And so as a person in a quasi-judicial position, your job is to determine whether or not the competent substantial evidence, I would submit, outweighs generalized concerns about traffic. We've done everything in accordance with the Land Development Code and the comprehensive plan as confirmed by your planning director and your professional planning staff.
But you're saying that your DOT plan is only addressed Beach Boulevard, is that correct?
That's right. We are held to the test about what impacts we're going to have on the road that's directly in front of us. And if we were held to a higher test, if there was a traffic study required, the staff would have said, hey, wait a minute, you need a traffic study. Now, they may require an operational study when we go into permitting to make sure that the traffic signals work, that make sure that the turn lanes work. But in terms of, the splits, how many cars go this way and how many go that way and what streets they filter out on, that's not a requirement of the application. The requirement of the application is to show that there's capacity, and the primary road that we're impacting is Beach Boulevard.
How far is that when you say it's from Beach Boulevard? From the entrance of your place, is it half a mile this way and half a mile this
Well,
way?
the data that I've provided you gives you the relevant segment that we're placed on in Beach Boulevard according to DOT, which I don't know where those break, but I can.
To your point, though, I guess the question for the city, why wasn't a traffic study recommended?
I'm happy to continue the conversation. I have a few other points I want to make in response to other citizens' comments.
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk about. You want me to finish my comments and then?
Let's take questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the DOT information shows Beach Boulevard operating at level of service C. And even through 2045, there's at level of service C as well. So again, traffic, to me, you have data and facts versus generalized concerns.
What is level C? What does that mean?
So each roadway is measured, A, B, C, D, F, A, B, C, D, E, F, and you get to F, and that's when the road is failing and it's over capacity. And that is that it has too many trips, too many cars traveling on it during certain periods of time, and it can be measured on a daily basis or an annual basis or a.
So would C be like an average? Like
C would be an average. In North Florida, a C level road is outstanding. There are not very many A and B roads in North Florida. C is.
But what are we talking about, Beach Boulevard?
We are talking about Beach Boulevard. Beach Boulevard at a C level. When I got the data from DOT, I was surprised. That's a very good. I was expecting there to be a bigger issue there, but in my opinion, in my experience, that is not an issue. Level of service C is an outstanding ability to accommodate additional cars, especially when you consider the alternatives that are available by right. Because by right, we could add even more cars, which there's capacity to add. We're actually asking to put fewer cars on the road than we're permitted to by the current zoning on the property. So we believe it's not only able to be accommodated, but actually a benefit, because there's fewer trips.
You're just looking at trips though, that's right. Because when you say fewer cars, there are still more local cars brought to Jacksonville Beach, correct?
Again, you can make assumptions on however you want.
Sure.
It could be that all 427 units are filled by people in Jacksonville Beach.
Correct.
And then you have no net increase of trips. It could be that everybody that's in a triplex now.
But you're assuming, but you just keep talking about trips over and over again, but that's the only thing that you
Well,
can measure.
that's how it's measured. That's how,
Only
that's,
measurement
no,
tool.
that's average daily trips, or daily trips, or PM peak hour trips, or AM peak hour trips.
Sure.
That's how traffic is measured. You can go out and count cars in lots of different ways, but traffic engineers in the IT trip generation manual recognizes it in the format that's presented here on table 1. That's just how it's expressed. That's why I keep talking about trips, because that's how it's thought of. Again, you haven't received any data from the neighbors, for example, that says, on Thursday there's 10,000 cars, but Beach Boulevard only allows 3,000, or only has capacity for 3,000. That would be maybe fact-based information. But you don't have that. What you have is a generalized concern about traffic, which everyone has generalized concerns about traffic. And so what we're asking you to do is look at the data and the information that we've provided from experts, the DOT and the IT trip generation manual, and we're asking you to base your decision on that. Other concerns regarding schools, for example, we gave this application to the school board. So Randy Gallup, who's in the school, who's the head of, at the time, was head of concurrency for the school board. The school board didn't have any comments or concerns about schools or kids, and so if there had been, they would have sent comments in to the staff, and we would have been talking about schools and what the impact would be.
Did they respond with something that says they don't have any comments or concerns?
Randy Gallup, there,
Respond.
I will find a response. I don't have it with me here tonight, but Randy Gallup and I definitely spoke about the application, and he provided feedback on the application. The other information, I would say regarding public use. Again, remember, Adventure Landing is not a public use. Adventure Landing is a private business that allows private people, when they pay money, to come and be there. So the notion that Adventure Landing is a public use is not exactly accurate. I understand what Ms. Sawyer was saying, but you have to remember it is a private use after all. And when it goes away, a different private use would go there. The question is recreation versus housing in that instance, and we would submit that because of the increase in recreation land, the increase in conservation land, that more than offsets and allows for the conversion of a little less than, or a little more than 3 acres from recreation open space that has cars parked on it right now, and instead is converted and takes away other development potential on the property. I think I'll stop there for now, because I know you want to talk a little bit more with Ms. Ireland about traffic, and we'll talk more and be happy to answer questions as we keep going. Yes, ma'am.
Can I ask you one more question? You have listed this as a luxury apartment. Do you know what the average cost would be, or the average rent would be for the luxury apartment?
So we don't, but there won't be, again, there was a concern, I think, regarding Section 8 housing from Ms. Sawyer. We're certainly not planning Section 8. However, if it's important to this board that we hold out a certain number of units for workforce or attainable housing, we're prepared to talk about that. And so if that's something that's important to this board, then we have an idea on how we can accomplish that in order to make sure that there are additional units available on an attainable basis.
Yeah, absolutely, workforce housing needs to be involved in this. That's absolutely true. And I can't believe anybody would want to build this without it. Because if you look at who does the work out here and where they live, it validates the workforce housing issue.
Yeah, we're prepared to talk about that when it gets to the right point. The average size units, I think, the code requires certain size units for 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. I think on average they're about 800 or 850 square feet. on average. There'll be a majority of 1 and 2 bedroom units, very few 3 bedroom units. We don't have the exact mix yet because we haven't gotten to that level of detail in the interior design. But yeah, the attainable and workforce housing is an issue that we agree should be addressed, and we're prepared to talk about it tonight.
I'm not sure if it's a question for you or the city, but can someone just let me know how property tax for an apartment complex is calculated?
They generally, when it's put on, it's okay, Mr. Allen, but generally what happens is that the property appraiser takes your all-in construction costs, which he pulls from your building permits, and then he puts it on the tax roll about 85% of that plus land. So he assesses your land based on comps and what you paid for it, does some adjustments, and then he adds to that 85% generally of your construction costs. They also include factors for soft costs as well. We estimated that this project would cost about $80 million to build a year ago. I think that we don't have a new number yet, but certainly with inflation and everything that's going on, this will be north of $100 million I believe, although we haven't priced it yet. It'll be north of $100 million development overall. The other thing that I want to make sure everyone knew too on the retail space that we've added, we also allocated 20 dedicated parking spaces for the retail as well, which complies with code. So everything regarding this development complies with your zoning category for, I can't remember what it's called, R2, right. So even though it's being done as a PUD, it's being done that way so that we would obligate ourselves to the retail, so we'd obligate ourselves to the boardwalk, we would obligate ourselves to the open space, and then we anticipated there may be other conditions such as...
Wait, is a boardwalk? There's a viewing area.
Viewing area.
Okay.
There's a boardwalk
That's different.
Yeah, I call it a viewing platform, but there's a walkway that goes out to the viewing platform. But we wanted to make it so that there would be the ability to add conditions regarding development. So that's, anyway, that's where we are.
Ms. Allen, can you help us with the question about the city traffic, whether the city had additional questions about that?
Sure, so, Mr. Devenau's correct, the code calls for, how many, basically, trips are gonna be generated from this project. We certainly don't have a traffic engineer on staff with the city that could do any further analysis or data generation for this. If we wanted to get into it deeper, like where are all those trips going, for example, that would have to be something that's done by either the applicant or a third party. We just don't have that in-house capacity. There's a lot of things that go into it beyond what, and I can't even speak to it because I'm certainly not an expert in traffic. So, but they gave us what's required by the code to be provided for a project of this type in regards to traffic. I made some other notes, if you guys don't mind, I can address some of the things that came up with the comments. I think Mr. Devenau answered the question about schools. We do have an email from Duval County School Board saying there is existing capacity in our schools out here at the beach for what they would project is the student population of this proposed development.
What is it?
It was 105 students, but that's spread out among all of the available schools. So they look at that total number and they look at the capacity for each school. And they have a certain number they can go above based on classrooms and such. So each school has a different percentage, like over 100%, for example, that they can actually accommodate.
Why would
So,
they be spread across different schools? Wouldn't they be in one school then?
and not necessarily, there's private schools out here as well, so they're not automatically accounting for all of those students to be in the public school system.
Is that a projection that there's 105 students out of 427 units?
That's what's estimated based on the unit count. That's the information that they gave us, so whatever math that the school board uses. There was a question about security and stuff for the tenants. That's operational, so I would defer to Mr. Devenau if there's further questions on that. We don't have any requirements for the provision of, currently have no requirements for the provision of any low-income housing or elderly as far as like requiring that to be done. Obviously, it's an incentive you mentioned he'd be willing to discuss. And I think that covers all the comments, and again, I'll be happy to answer any further questions that you guys have for me.
Yes, ma'am, when you guys were working this through, and we talk about all of that terrible oil that those two dirt and gravel parking lots will no longer contribute to the conservation lands to the south, it looks to me like the slope is to the south and out. Where is the parking lot storm sewer, storm drainage? Which way does that go off of the
For
proposed project?
existing or current, or proposed, I'm sorry.
Proposed.
Okay, I'll let
Proposed,
you
yeah.
answer that, yeah.
Yeah, so the proposed drainage from the pond there also discharges into the intercoastal. The difference though is that the water that goes into that pond settles, and whatever chemicals and whatever things that are in the water will settle before it's discharged into the, out into the marsh in the intercoastal there. Today, the way the gravel parking lots are constructed, they're kind of like bowls with the parking around the sides, and there's a bowl, and then there's a drain right in the middle of the bowl. That drain has a pipe that goes straight out into the.
Well, this is an improvement, absolutely. I was speaking with the Chief Resiliency Officer for the state of Florida, Dr. Wes Brooks, the other day, and actually how that works is the vegetation around there absorbs a lot of that.
It does, and the other thing that's great about this is the pond, because it's closer to the water, it's also the preferred location. Sometimes you'll see the retention ponds up near the street, and what happens is you've got a lot of additional runoff into the system itself that's not treated. And so this is an ideal location for the pond. It's the best solution. And
That is a good place.
Thank you.
I'm hung up on the DOT study. Do you know where that's out in here? Does anybody
Yeah,
know?
the DOT study, that information is exhibit J to the rezoning application. Oh, it's in both? Okay. So it's pages on the very back, it's after the site plan. It's this spreadsheet here, and it goes on for a few pages.
So, just to that point for traffic estimates and confidence substantial evidence versus generalized concerns, I understand that the only requirement is for a study of each boulevard traffic. However, generalized concerns should lead to gathering confidence substantial evidence, right? So I don't believe that we have a complete picture of how this is actually going to affect traffic in Jacksonville Beach, specifically Penman Road. I would also point out that in A1A, that is one road that is based on current projections, and we've already established that we've gone past our current projections when it comes to growth. So my concern on this is that no matter how you slice it, the traffic information is incomplete.
I would have to agree with that because I'm looking at your exhibit J, and on the first page, and it says segment length of the study is 1.953 miles, so it's 2 miles. So coming out of Adventure Landing driveway or your unit coming up, it's going to be a mile this way and a mile that way.
Right. So again, respectfully, that 1.9 miles probably starts at the base of the Intercoastal Bridge, which is less the base of the bridge, and goes east. But because they're not going to make the link go all the way west of the
Then that
bridge.
does, okay.
So it takes into account the majority of the link is moving east towards the ocean. But Commissioner Andrews, to your point, we can't be held to a standard that whatever somebody thinks of that we have to address. We can't read people's minds. All we can do is do what's required by us of us by the code, which we've done.
And what we vote for,
And,
right?
well, sure, you can vote however you see fit.
Exactly.
Of course. But what I would ask you to do is to follow the code and follow the rules and follow the information you have before you. For example, your comment about A1A being over capacity, there's nothing in the record that shows that.
My comment specifically was that it's a projection for it being, and we've already established that we are not anywhere near our projections at this point, right? And I agree with you. You are only required to present what is required, right? It's this commission's job to see if we meet the comprehensive plan in things that are not necessarily strictly, they could affect traffic and not strictly required by your application.
Right.
That's
So
what
Which
I'm
is not
saying.
your fault.
And I'm not complaining. I think you've done an amazing job and you're very thoughtful about what you're trying to do here. I'm saying that I don't believe that traffic information is complete.
So what I would ask, if that's a continuing concern, would be then that you add a condition that we provide that information during our permitting process to demonstrate the results that exist.
No.
That's what I would recommend on how you
Oh, I
address
just,
it.
you are correct, it's from San Pablo Parkway to Penman Road. So that's basically from one side of the bridge to the other, or to the very bottom of the bridge past Angie's. Maybe instead of just doing a condition based while you're getting your permit, maybe you could come back and do a further FDOT study for us, showing us what, or maybe bring one of your experts in as far as the C rating, as far as how long it is, because it's not giving Jacksonville Beach a study of traffic. And I don't know if you live here or not, but the residents that do live here understand that if you build, and this is their concerns, if you build something here, that Third Street's going to be affected.
So our, just again, just to remind you, the developer's business is here in Jacksonville Beach. He has employees that live in Jacksonville Beach. I don't personally live in Jacksonville Beach, but I fully appreciate it and understand the concern. It's a street that I drive on routinely. So I understand the concerns. I would just say that I would submit respectfully that we've done what's required of us, and that if you require or desire additional information, then we'll get to work on it.
Just moving away from the traffic questions, just wanted to talk a little bit about the viewing platform and the boardwalk. I think initially there was some talk about a boardwalk. What happened?
So what happened, well, the first thing is that we had representatives from St. John River Water Management District out to look at the property and make sure that it could be accomplished. And so we had proposed a boardwalk and a viewing platform in a particular location coming off of Shetter. And the Water Management District permit reviewer was very enthusiastic about it. Her advice was that the boardwalk be located a little bit further east, that it not have a canoe launch or a kayak launch, because she felt like the length of walking down Shetter was too far to ferry a boat out there. It's a little over a third of a mile to get out to the water. So she was more interested in a viewing platform and maybe a place where kayaks could tie up from the water rather than coming in off the land. We had neighborhood meetings we've met with and talked to, and I think it's interesting that, other than the two folks on Hobson Road, we've talked to everybody else. We've reached out to the HOAs in the area. We've met with them to the south. We've met with the Discovery School, with Taco Lou, with the church to the west, Beach Marine across the street, the townhome neighborhood that's underneath Beach Boulevard, underneath the bridge. We've made ourselves available and discussed it with everyone. What happened in the instance of the boardwalk is that there was enough opposition from the neighborhood that we felt like it really wasn't our fight. So what we are doing is we're proposing that we will do our part, and that if the city decides they want to build a boardwalk down Shetter and connect to us, we will accommodate the connection. And we'll even contribute to the cost of doing that, as well as provide an easement for that boardwalk that would cross our property. But if we had proposed that today, our fear was that we would be having a weeks-long discussion about a boardwalk that really was not ours to propose. It really was up to the city. And so we're willing to make the connection, we're willing to accommodate it, we'll even pay and contribute to it, as well as get an easement for it. But we didn't include it in our application because there were enough folks that lived on that street near Discovery School that did not want that connection to exist. So that's what happened. Long answer.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah.
I think it is clear, though, that when people don't want something, they show up for it, but when they do, they don't usually know about it or show up for it, as you can see tonight, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Everyone in that neighborhood, generally, that we've spoken with, we've addressed all the concerns that we know to address. I mean, there are other things in the application that were based on meetings we have with the community as well, but anyway.
Through the chair? Yeah, I'd just like to make one correction. Mr. Demonow said we were in a quasi-judicial hearing this evening, and that's not correct. We are recommending to the council. So it's not quasi-judicial.
I think that as regards to the zoning it is, but I understand what you're saying. It is a different hearing, but.
It's not our decision.
Yeah, that's right.
I had just two other concerns. I'm going to group them into one in the interest of time here, right? And really, it revolves around what I had asked before, which is the net decrease of 3.76 acres of recreational open use space, right? And that kind of dovetails into the planned unit development of creative uses, if you will, for it, right? I do not view recreational open space and conservation as equal, correct? Now, conservation, I applaud you for what you've done here in trying to get everything in conservation. My concern is that there's not enough of a mixed use for it. It's much more of just a strict apartment complex, which I understand is what you want to do, but there's not 500 or 5,000 square feet, not really that, and 20 parking spaces, not that big of a mixed use. But the other part here is the recreational open space, which contemplates kind of benefit to the public on that. And I don't know, this is the most tenuous part of your argument for me, that it actually meets the requirements in our comprehensive plan to allow the change of recreational open space to anything else, unless there's something of the same size, of substantially the same size within here.
Right. So, first of all, I appreciate the concern. Two responses. Number one is that's not how the comprehensive plan views it, but I understand your position. If you're concerned about that, then change all of parcel 8 to recreation and open space. Because we are only changing it to conservation because that seemed like the most logical category for us there. But it's kind of a fiction, recreation and open space versus conservation. They're essentially the same thing. I understand the recreation component. That's why we added the boardwalk and or the viewing platform rather, so that you could get access to that conservation land. And I would submit that when you're staying on the viewing platform, you're going to be able to see all 30 acres, all 38 acres located to the south, that is recreation open space. The third point I would make is the recreation open space that you're talking about today that's being converted has cars parked on it.
I agree.
So it's a lower quality, and you have the ability to increase the amount of recreation open space if you want to. Or we could have maybe applied and done our application differently and just increased it
I agree.
artificially.
I'm just addressing the generalized concern, if you will, the lack of activities, right? That were understood. Conventional landing is going away, right? It's private property. You're within your rights to develop it in accordance with the land development code, right? I'm just asking if there's any way to get something that is more than just a boardwalk or a viewing area that just ends.
Well,
so there's something more creative, which is.
We support the connection to Shutter. So if that were important, that's something that we would work on, because that would, although it's not completed, the pedestrian plan for Jack's Beach isn't yet finalized. It contemplates a connection from Shutter all the way to the beach. And we would love that. So us allowing the connection for folks to go from the beach down Shutter onto the property and go to coffee or go drop a kayak or avoid Beach Boulevard altogether and go over the bridge, we would support that. And so we believe that's making that connection available, which is another benefit, because otherwise the city would have to pay for the connection, they would have to acquire the easement from us. We're offering all of that at the cost, which again is another benefit to the community. Although it hasn't been acted on yet by the city, it's available.
I have a question for Ms. Ireland. The conservation and rezoning that parcel, if that is rezoned conservation, can later it be rezoned to low-density residential?
Yes, that request could be made through this board and city council. So it wouldn't be an automatic request. It would go back through this entire public process.
Could it also be rezoned to a high residential area?
No, because I believe the entirety of it is in a flood zone. And I don't think the whole property is shown on the map, just, I don't know where it is. Forgive me. Yeah, all of that is in a flood zone. So the answer essentially is no. So you can see south of here, It's either low density residential or conservation. I will point out that in the conservation land use category, a boardwalk or something like that is permitted. So it doesn't have to be recreation open space to allow some kind of access. The reason the brakes were kind of pumped, if you will, on that topic is, I think Mr. DiBenale mentioned, City Council hasn't yet approved the final Urban Trails Master Plan. It's almost done. It's going to go before them very soon. That's being directed by the Parks Department. They haven't been looped into this discussion yet either. And the workshops we had and the discussions we had with council, they weren't really willing to really fully commit to it yet without some pieces of the puzzle being put in place. So Urban Trails Master Plan, again, it's not budgeted for. We haven't engaged the Parks Department yet. So I don't think it's off the table completely, but we have to have a lot more discussions before the participation of the city is engaged for some type of boardwalk, potentially down Cheddar. Because as he mentioned, we did get a lot of people come out from the neighborhood and said they don't want anything like that. So we obviously have to have a lot more discussions before we proceed.
Following up on that comment, Heather, in your report, you have the statement, these parcels, and you're referring to 6, 7, and 8. These parcels are currently not developable due to existing conservation easements held by the St. Johns River Water Management District, governing the parcels that prohibit any development of any kind. You stand by that?
Yes, so while the underlying land use and zoning allows for development, the conservation easement currently does not.
So effectively, nothing's happening with that land?
Nothing's happening with it, no, not at this point in time.
I just think that's important for everybody to understand.
Well, if I may ask, what about either some discussion as to whether it should be conservation or recreational open space land use category? So would does the city have a position on whether that, if I understood that correctly, would the city have a position on whether conservation is better than recreational open space for parcel?
To me, it wouldn't matter, because right now the conservation easement says you can't do anything, even a boardwalk. So as was mentioned, that would have to be amended to allow the boardwalk just to happen at all. So it really doesn't matter if it's recreation or open space or conservation, because the same use that's being talked about would be allowed.
So is all of the recreation open space located in 6, 7, and 8? I thought we were rezoning from that to high density.
So currently 2, 4, and 5 are recreation open space. I'll point out that kind of this dividing line here, prior to 90, I think it was 99 and 97, this half over here was low density residential contiguous to this, and this whole portion over here, including 6 and 7, were high density residential prior to Adventure Landing changing the land use and zoning to accommodate their 2 gravel parking areas. So those are the current rec open space. These would be the proposed recreation open space. And again, open space is the intent for these properties, not necessarily public recreation, because they're not public recreation now, as was mentioned, they're parking lots for a private commercial use. And then all of this down, this is our parcel 6 is already conservation. Parcel 8 in its entirety with this proposed change would be conservation. But again, the boardwalk would be, in theory, permitted per the comp plan, whether it's conservation or rec open space. It just depends on whether the conservation easement could be amended.
Heather, could you please show us where the St. Johns River Water Management District conservation easements sit? Is that all of 8?
All of 8 and all of 6 and I believe 7. Is that accurate?
No. So it's all of 6, and then I don't know how to point. Yeah. So all of 6, and then all of 8 except there's right in here. There's about 1/3 of an acre or so that is not part of the conservation easement. 7 is not part of the conservation easement. So, but essentially, it's all of 6.
So 90% of 8 and all of 6.
Probably 95% of 8 and all of 6.
And there's St. John's Water Management.
Yeah, they're two different easements. So again.
Same restrictions, just different boundaries?
There are different restrictions and different boundaries. We had originally proposed the Water Management District that we have our boardwalk our viewing platform or boardwalk come off of this through 8. Their actual idea was to have it run down 6 because it had, there was more uplands in here where it would be easier to put a boardwalk, wouldn't impact the environment as much. So their actual idea was to bring the boardwalk here and connect to Cheddar right in this area. Either way, if we do a viewing platform here or a boardwalk here, we're going to have to amend the conservation easements under either scenario.
St. John's River Water Management District would have to amend them, right?
That's right.
Yeah, not you.
Well, yeah, that's correct. We'd have to apply and spend the money to do it. And the other thing that I wanted to mention too about the land use here and, you know, could we change it to medium density residential or commercial or any of that stuff? My point in that was not saying what we would use it for later. My point was that if we change it this way, just like they did with parcel 6, this used to be all high density residential. Now, in order for us to change it, there has to be a public meeting and everybody gets notice. Under this scenario today, if we wanted to develop this, we could go get this conservation easement changed without a bunch of notice and without a bunch of public hearings. So our proposal, or what we're submitting, is that this protects the public better than that from future development of parcel 8. Well, forever, because once you change the land use on it, you can't build it without changing the land use, and the signs go up and the notices go out.
Again, it's low density, right? Parcel 8 is low density.
Yeah, as long as it's low density, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. And again, getting to the cost, so we bought this, this is also important. We bought this parcel from a gentleman, actually a really interesting guy from Argentina, who bought it out of a tax deed sale for $2,500. He had a plan to develop about 2 acres right here. He was going to build his own home. And it is feasible, it was feasible for him to build a house and build this road, and we talked him out of that so that we could buy the property. So when you're thinking about, probably not going to be a subdivision, probably not going to have all 18 acres developed, but there's a really nice 7-acre piece right here that's available, and at some price and some time, it's a feasible project. He certainly thought it was feasible for one home, for himself, which is why we paid the equivalent of one, you know, we paid $300,000 for the property, which is the equivalent of basically one lot, recognizing that it's a conservation easement, but we thought it was important to protect that parcel.
Your intentions to later change that to
No.
low density?
No, and to Mr. Lerman's point earlier, even if we do a shopping center or whatever on parcel 1 up here under the current zoning, we're not going to develop this. We're not.
We don't know what's going to happen in the future. And your intention is what you're talking
That's
about.
right. That's our intention.
That's your intention. Okay, I'm still confused though. How would you talk and breathe for?
So they love to activate their land. So the land that they have, one of the permit reviewers down to come meet with us on site, and we all put our boots on and we walked out into the marsh. So, and we shot GPS coordinates on where the most likely locations were for a boardwalk or a viewing platform, and that's entirely consistent with their mission.
That's different than low density residential.
It is very different from low density residential.
Very different. Yeah.
And they in fact, well, anyway, we have work to do, but we wouldn't be offering it today if we didn't think we could get it done. After meeting with the reviewers and looking at the easements, it will require a change, but those easements were done 25, 30 years ago, the other one 15 years ago. Their mission to open up access to preserved lands is consistent with what we would be proposing. So we're confident we could get it done.
Other questions? I do have one more question for the planners. Mr. DiDonato mentioned the idea of doing a traffic analysis that would look more at, I guess, where the cars are coming from going to as part of the permitting stage. Is that something that the city would benefit from?
Potentially. The major concerns that I've heard were related to Beach Boulevard, 3rd, and Penman, none of which are roads that are owned or maintained by the city, nor do we maintain the traffic levels on those. Penman is the city of Jacksonville, 3rd and Beach are both DOT. So even if we did a impact analysis on those streets, the odds are that the results of that would be DOT is going to say either there is capacity or there will be when they do some project. Penman, as an example, as you're aware, is going through rehabilitation and multimodal transportation, traffic calming, a bunch of other things. That may in fact lower its trips, depending on how it comes out, but at the end of the day, I don't think that's going to have much impact on anything that we can do. It may be able to look at some of the, what we consider residential streets, none of them are like major collectors or arterials, but typically most of your traffic flows on the big streets. So the impacts are going to be predominantly the streets that aren't ours. Again, I don't know if there's necessarily a benefit to that, because at the end of the day, it's not something that we can engineer or contribute to. So I will say that the ADT process, the average daily trips, the fundamental logic that's used in that is a standard for development throughout the state. It is what's in our comp plan and every other comp plan, and the reason is it is generally accepted to roughly predict the impact. There's nothing other than putting GPSs on cars to really understand what's going to happen to the cars that are there. Some people may work in downtown Jacksonville, some people may work here. But at the end of the day, if it's something that this board thinks is important, without doing the study, we really can't say what the benefit would be, but it's something that we could require at the development stage during the development review process, which is when all the various utilities and city agencies get together and review the project for compliance with stormwater standards and public works, sewer, water, that kind of thing.
So that is one of the things I heard, a potential condition that we might consider on the, I guess, planning development. Understood that we do need to open, I guess, close the public hearing and then open the public hearing specific to plan unit development as well. But the other potential condition that I believe I heard was something about workforce housing. And so we as a commission need to, and we may want to think about that. So I'm going to suggest that we, and Sandy, you do need to tell me if I'm doing this wrong, but I propose to close this public hearing and then open it again specific to the planning unit development.
So you're opening one for that?
Yes. Well, we're still in the public hearing.
If you close the public hearing on the land use, Madam Chair, and reopen it for the rezoning, I just want to let you know I'm not going to say anything new. So I'm not going to go first on the rezoning. So if you want to go straight to cards or comments, then that'd be fine, and I'll rebut at the end to save time. I'm not going to repeat myself on the rezoning application.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to get to is at what point should I close it and then open it again? And am I understanding this is just a procedural question, everybody?
You're not going to reopen a public hearing that you just closed, you're going to open a second public hearing dealing with the second.
Okay. Okay. So if it's okay with my fellow commissioners, that's what I'm supposed to do is, Mr. DiBenau, I believe, is not going to be giving us any additional information because we've kind of dealt with both issues together. But having said that, I'm going to open the public hearing specific to, PC 1321 to see if there's any members of the public who would like to address us specific to that item. I just want to make sure everyone has their opportunity. And I guess we have speaker cards for, I'm seeing 2 hands go up for folks who have already addressed us, and we already have speaker cards for them, so yes, please do.
But I'd like to interject. I thought Mr. Devino came up and said he was going to speak on both issues in the beginning so that he would wrap them up together rather than speak on one and then the other. Is that correct?
Right, I'm not going to speak.
Right, so you should give him a rebuttal on both issues.
So I'm not going to, yeah. I'm not going to speak again, it's a new public hearing, but I'm not going to give a presentation again, because my presentation was covered the first time around. But if there are new issues brought up that are identified in the next few speakers, then I would ask to have the opportunity to rebut them. But if it's the same conversation, I'm not going to be able to have the same conversation again.
Okay. So having said that, sorry, but yes, we would welcome if there are members of the public who have speaker cards in or want to put in speaker PC 1321, which we haven't heard from you.
I listed both on my card. Is that okay?
You have to be sworn in each time though, each time you speak.
All these proceedings.
Thank you, sir.
Raise your right hand, name and address.
My name is Duke Lewis, and I live at 18 Hobson Road.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do. Again, I thought I was unprepared before, but just a few things that I heard mentioned. It seemed a little disingenuous to bring up workforce housing at such a late moment in this. They had several public meetings. They've spoken with y'all. They got a packet of paper over there that they've given you to discuss. How has this not come up before tonight? So just a little bit like we're throwing stuff at the wall to see if we can get you to buy off on it. About the schools and capacity, I think you should better look into that. Does this mean certain kids might get shifted to other schools to make capacity? You know, capacity is a thing. Is it moving kids between schools at the beach, or is it moving kids across the bridge to other schools? You know, I think you were all kind of shocked when we were like, Beach Boulevard's not at capacity. Well, if you tried to drop it on a Saturday somewhere between noon and 6, it's pretty backed up. The idea that we don't have a larger study that goes past Penman Road or any further, yeah, you can submit the minimum to you guys, but I don't think you should demand more of it if you can, or if it helps convince you with it, you should at least acknowledge that bringing more about traffic when it's the #1 issue would be better to try and get this thing passed. Again, just because it's timely with the hurricane, we're adding more people that would definitely have to evacuate. I don't know if we do any sort of assessment as far as how would this affect places for people to evacuate or centers of evacuation. But just all these things could be taken into consideration with your decision. Thank you again.
Thank you.
And just a comment on that, on his comment. It wasn't disingenuous to bring it up about workforce housing because Mr. Devenau brought it up. We didn't bring it up.
I apologize. Maybe that it was brought up at the last minute in this meeting versus bringing it up throughout the continuity of planning this project.
Roger that. Right.
Thank you. Gary Patel.
Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Gary Paytown, 725 Bon Air Circle, Jack's Beach.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, I do. I just wanted to touch base with you and let you know that from my perspective, I don't want this to become a strip development. The opportunities that are presented to us by this developer are very unique, and I think we need the opportunity to really work with them to make it a win-win situation for all of us. Win for the city, a win for the developer. This is the only way we're going to get something done at a very important intersection within the city. When you come across that bridge, somehow it needs to say you're in Jack's Beach. At the moment, that's not what we have there. But with this developer and what he's done since the initial conversations have occurred in reference to this development, have really improved, specifically on the southern end of the development. He's made significant changes and improvements. Are they 100% what we want? No, I don't believe so. But you've got somebody who's willing to spend millions of dollars to put in a development that could speak well for the city. So we need the opportunity to work with him further to get something that really is a statement at that intersection. I'd hate to see this thing end up like the Kmart Center in Neptune Beach, where everybody bought that development. And what you ended up with is a strip center going in there now, instead of a wonderful mixed-use development that could have extended what was their town center and the direction and architecture that was established in the town center. So please, just take the opportunity to work with this developer. I think we can do some great things together. Yes, maybe there's a few more questions that need to be answered. If they're in reference to traffic, we can ask for that information. But let's make it a productive conversation. on the back end. What about the front side of all of this along Beach Boulevard? To me, unfortunately, it's a lot of asphalt, and it'd be nice to see something more than asphalt along the major road as you come into Jack's Beach. There are existing trees that occur on the west side of the entrance into Adventure Landing. There are some beautiful existing live oaks, some big old trees. We ought to save those trees and work around them, integrate that into the development, and make it something that we're very proud of. We've got an opportunity here. Let's make it work for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Heather McConville.
Raise your right hand, state your name and address.
Heather McConville, 619 14th Avenue North, Jacks Beach.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. I just couldn't possibly sit here for over 2 hours and not stand before you and clearly state how much I oppose this entire plan, and that I urge you all to really put our best interest as citizens into whether or not you allow the rezoning to occur. The current zoning as it sits actually does give something to the community. If you notice where the whole Mojo's shopping center is, it is full, it is vibrant, it is frequented by all of the residents throughout the community. I think we can have more of the same and have a really good looking area that will actually give back to the people in the community with jobs, places for more children and families to go and visit. And I think that's one of the biggest things we want in our community, and that what the people who live here keep saying is we want family friendly. I was born and raised here, and so growing up here as a kid and raising my own kids here, I understand how pedestrian safety, bicycle safety, these are all important things. How is allowing 600 or 700 more vehicles in our beach community going to continue to keep our community and our kids safe? I don't know if you all have kids, but I have one, and he rides his bike from Atlantic Beach Skate Park to Jacksonville Beach Skate Park all day long. And crossing 9th at Beach right there, I mean, I'm thankful that we have that crosswalk and hope he's using it, but these kids are doing that all day long, and I don't think that allowing a project that's going to put those kind of cars in that area is the smart thing to do for our kids and for the future, because our beach is growing, but it's growing the right way, you know? Just want to look at my notes really quick. The only people that are going to use the viewing platform are going to be the people that live in the apartment complex. As a resident, I'm not going to drive through the apartment complex to park a car or maybe not have a parking space to walk out on a platform. I don't know too many residents that are going to do that. And then again, I would just say, I don't know what would keep them from going back years down the road when maybe none of us are even here and developing parcel 8. If we start giving little by little by little, then we've given it all, and we might as well just give it all. And I think we're going to have a lot of upset people in the community. I wish these meetings were at 5 o'clock. I know there's a lot of families that would have liked to have been here, but with sports and other things, they can't get here at 7 o'clock, and most people have walked out because they can't stay past 9. So I think the open houses were great. I attended them, but I think the word needs to get out to the community. We would have line out the door and people that wouldn't be able to get in this room if more people knew that this meeting was going on tonight. Thanks.
Barbara Bauer.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I just want to say a few things on the rezoning issue. This gentleman spoke, and he said that his concern was the development, and that is his concern, because
that's what he's here to represent. Our concern and your concern needs to be the community, not the development and not a specific project. Because this project, as people say, is not being built in a vacuum. So you have to consider the impact of this project on the city along with every other project that's being proposed to you, because that's how it impacts us, the people who live here. The other thing is, he keeps talking that this project complies with the zoning, and it doesn't. It complies with the zoning he is requesting. It does not comply with the zoning he bought the property as. And let's see, I have another thing. Yeah, I don't know where he got that statistic on the children, because he stood here and he said they don't know how many 1, 2, or 3 bedroom apartments they're building yet. So if they don't know how many 1, 2, 3 bedroom apartments, how can they even project how many children are going to be in this project to go to these schools? If they build all 1 bedroom apartments, you're not going to have any children. If they build all 3 bedroom apartments, you might have a ton of kids. So that's a bogus statistic too. Oh, I know. They really want to get this project going and have the community back them. Perhaps they can reduce it to 200 apartments. I'd be okay with that. Thank you.
The last card I have is Ken Marsh.
Ken Marsh, 2011 Gale Avenue.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Talking about your concern and your duty, part of that is really about consistency with the comp plan. And in my earlier piece, I mentioned this one doesn't fit the bill for TE 1.1. That we do have a responsibility, according to that piece of our comp plan, that says, can these additional cars be taken on all our roads? And we don't have all the data to support that. Now, I do believe that it passed all the check marks for the planning department. I think the developer did what he needed to do. But in spite of that, it doesn't answer the question in a fact-based manner, can all of our roads, and Christian, it's not just 3rd Street or Penman, it's also South Beach Parkway and 9th Street. Okay, those are our north-south corridors, and we don't have the answer to that. And if we ask for a study, we can't assume what the study is going to tell us until, not factually, we have to know. And that's something we should know before you vote. Now, I agree with Gary Paytow that says we need to work with the developer. I think he's absolutely right. A year ago, we had the workshops, and myself and many other residents said, look, traffic's an issue. We should have thought about this a year ago. Not today, not tomorrow. We should have thought about it a year ago. And so here we are tonight talking about it. And I feel bad that we are penalizing the developer, but in some respects. However, Gary's also right. This is a key piece to Jack's Beach. And we need to get this right. And I mean, get it right. So let's do our due diligence. Let's get our facts, because that's what this is all about. This is all about what is the data telling us. And then I asked the question, can we say factually that I'm not going to be sitting in traffic bringing my kids to school or going to the grocery store? As long as you guys can tell me that, the developer can tell me that, and Heather and her group can tell me that, I'm good to go with that. Do I think there's other things I'd rather see? Absolutely there is. And Steve knows all about those things. But that's not what I'm up here talking about. I'm talking about TE1, and I'm talking about LU1, which means quality of life for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, okay, one quick. I had both on my card as well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep. Lynn Heilman, 22 Hudson Road.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do. I would just like to say that as part of the planning commission, Dave brought up the point that he had to come to Heather's office to get a copy of the package, had 4 days to review it, spent some of his weekend. Some of Colleen's questions led me to believe that there's so much material here that you maybe didn't have enough time to review it all. With these questions here, I really think that this is important enough that, you know, you don't make a hasty decision and that you do represent the citizens on both sides. Mr. Devenau has done a fantastic job. They've modified things. And, you know, as a direct neighbor to this project, I do ask that we work with him because, you know, they're trying to make it right. But answer the questions for the citizens. And don't just make a hasty decision to push it on through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to address us?
I think I do want to say one more thing on the side.
And Rachel Sire, 67611 Long Meadow, South.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. I think a lot of us, we are very emotionally tied to Adventure Landing. I grew up going there, lots of us grew up going there, and we had amazing memories. Some of my favorite memories of childhood was there. So I feel like we need a plan for that. We need to say, okay, well, what's happening with one of our favorite places ever? You know, if there was some kind of vision to say, okay, well, we're not just saying goodbye to, you know, what's already there now. We need some kind of okay, well, this is what's going to happen to this place to make room for this place, you know, and then maybe we can kind of vision it better. But right now, I just feel like a lot of us are just so tied to what's already there that it's hard for us to open up to any of this idea. And so we're picking it apart and trying to find out what's wrong with it, what can we do to stop it, all these things, when really it's, you know, save Adventure Landing, you know, is there a place, another place we can put it? We have to support the community by keeping that place going, period. Like, everyone loves it, everyone's, like I said, tied to it emotionally, physically, it creates jobs for people, you know, lots of people rely on that place for many different things. Like someone was saying that even just the kids' birthday parties, how many young couples started their relationship and now they're married years later because they had a little mini golf date, you know, when they were teenagers or whatever. Like, I get emotional talking about it because I just love it so much. So, you know, I think if we can address, you know, that part of it, where can we save Adventure Landing? Where is that going to go? Can we preserve something with that avenue? And then maybe people will be more apt to agreeing with this plan. That's all.
Thank you.
So I think I'm going to close the public hearing, and then we'll take it back to the applicant and staff and Mr. Devenau.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to address a couple of things that were new. First of all, Mr. Lewis, it's amazing what people think about it. It's really a good point. He asked about hurricane evacuations. So there's this thing called the coastal high hazard, which is located just to the south of this property and comes up just right at the nub underneath the word parcel 2 there. So we have to stay out of that, even though the coastal high hazard comes slightly onto our property. That ensures that we don't increase the density of land that's in the coastal high hazard area. So there's actually a hurricane policy, an intercomprehensive plan that we comply with to make sure that hurricane evacuation concerns are dealt with. Secondly, the number of kids in school. So what you do is you send the number of apartment units to the school board. They have a formula that counts how many kids. It's not only 105 in the same school, but it's also 105 kids across all grades. And then they filter that out across all the schools, public, private, charter, and then they look and they see what their capacity is. That's the process that we followed. We didn't make up the 105 number. That came from the school board. Affordable housing, it came up. Imagine if we had proposed this as an affordable housing project, or imagine if we had proposed that 30% of the units would be affordable housing. I think we have a different mix in the audience of people regarding this project. So what we have done is we are proposing a market rate product, a market rate development, rents that will exceed probably $2,250, $2,400 a month. And we're saying that we will also do a certain number of units that are affordable. That's a logical continuation of the discussion. This isn't something that came up at the last minute. This is something that came up out of conversations with people in the community, people in the neighborhood. We spoke with some of the elected officials. They shared their concerns with me. And so that's where that idea came from. This isn't a last minute idea. Mr. Patel had a great idea that he shared with me previously about the trees along Beach Boulevard. If there's a way, what you're seeing in the renderings there is conceptual. It's, again, it's an architect's vision of what that streetscape might look like. Again, if we're able to preserve some of the oak trees, and if that's something that's important to this board, we will preserve some of the oak trees and to ensure the character of the streetscape. But again, this represents what's required by code. You've got the bushes along the sidewalk, you've got trees every so many feet, and then you have planted flowers on the front which aren't required by code, but this is going to be a really beautiful entrance to the city when we're done. But if, again, if saving some of the old growth trees is important, then we'll certainly work to do that. The term family friendly was used. Of course, we've talked about that at length in previous hearings. That's not part of the criteria. It's a nice thought. I would argue, by the way, that this is family friendly because it allows people to come and have different places to live in Jacksonville Beach. And then finally, regarding traffic and Mr. Marsh, you know, a two-lane road, just a regular old two-lane road, the capacity on just a regular two-lane road is between 14,000 and 17,000 cars per day. That's just a regular neighborhood road, one that goes through your neighborhood, maybe where your house is located. So the notion that we're going to trip or cause roads to fail off the sides of Beach Boulevard, even though it's not part of the requirement, that's just not going to happen. But I will say this, typically, and I'm offering this really without talking to my client, but typically we wouldn't do a traffic study until we're in permitting. If it's important to this board that we do a traffic study before we go to city council, and you want to make that a condition, then we'll figure out a way to get a traffic study done before October 17th. So I would offer that as a way to address the concerns so that we're not addressing it in what some might view as the back end of the project, but very early in the process, similar to what we did with the FEMA. You know, we went to FEMA out of order, in my opinion, but it was something that the director asked us to do, and we did it. It bore the result that we shrunk the development parcel. We shrunk the development parcel from 13 acres to 10.9 acres. And that was a result of the work that she required of us, in addition to adding the buffers. So if this board believes that it's important for us to do a traffic study earlier in the process, then we'll do that before October 17th, before the city council meeting. We would ask that you not defer us tonight for lack of a traffic study. Instead, we'd ask you to put that as a condition on us that we have it by October 17th. And certainly if we don't have it done, I suspect that the city council will revert us back to you. But for now, that's how we'd like to propose dealing with the traffic issue. You guys have been gracious with your time. And like I said, we're here to answer questions as they come up.
Thank you.
I have a bunch more. Sorry, everyone. All right, so for a $100 million project, we're definitely, in my opinion, I definitely want a traffic study. I mean, it's going to cost thousands for such a huge project with a big impact. Makes sense. How does short-term rentals work with apartments? Just curious if that could ever be a factor.
Yeah, that's a great question. So typically, they're dealt with in deed restrictions or property owner association documents, but there won't be short-term rentals in here. Whatever happens in this property will be in compliance with the code, whatever the code is, which I think you have like a five-day limit or something like that. I haven't followed that issue closely in Jack's Beach, or do you not have any requirement? So we're not going to have short-term rentals again. If you want to make that a requirement, I don't think you can technically require the form of ownership or the form of leases that we have in a zoning or a land use.
I was just curious.
But we're not intending to have that done.
Yeah.
So our friends in Tallahassee have preempted us from prohibiting short-term rentals. There is nothing that we can do about that particular issue. However, if this is a PUD zoning, they could make the determination that they don't want to allow them. Just like any of our condos or neighborhoods that are PUD or HOA. Yeah, those individual neighborhoods could prohibit them, but us as a city wouldn't be able to do that.
Makes sense. And I guess you might want to say, for the oak trees, I thought we had paperwork that says you can't remove like protected trees as part of Jack's Beach.
So if protected trees are removed, they have to be mitigated. So there's a whole section of our code, landscaping standards that, well, there's different standards, that's for single family specifically. So there's different standards. So for a project like this, we'd be looking at the entire site. They would have to give us a tree survey, tell us all the trees they're removing, tell us all the trees that they're gonna maintain, and then tell us what mitigation, and we check all that. And we tell them, okay, you've gotta mitigate 300 inches of trees. And then there's also the landscape requirement for new develop on top of that. So there's mitigation requirements and requirements. So there's different requirements depending on where on the site the trees would need to be placed.
Makes sense. Thank you. Question.
Question, Heather, on parcel 1, I think you mentioned, what were the number of units that could fit on parcel 1?
So as it stands now, without any land use or zoning change, I think the number was around 320 units.
306.
Would be permitted. That's what the new, so let me go back.
Now, the applicant is not entitled to that. That would be granted through conditional use?
Correct, since it's currently, well, it would be allowed under the land use. So multifamily residential would be allowed under the land use, but the current zoning of C2 would require either conditional use approval or a PUD to do the multifamily residential. As it currently exists, the density would be around 320 units. Based on what they're proposing to change parcel 1 to, which is less than what it is now, it would be less units.
So,
If that makes sense.
just to be clear, what I read was 306. There's
Right,
a couple
that-
more that are in parcel 2, is that the deal?
Well, parcel 1, as they're proposing it, is actually, would get smaller. So it's just under 8 acres. What they're proposing, sorry, I keep flipping too fast, is less than that, 7.66. So it's 7.98 versus 7.66, based on the current land use versus what they're proposing.
So, somewhere between 320.
Over, yeah, a little over 300, correct.
Sarlin, I've been doing this a long time. I think I came aboard here in 2002, but I've never heard this asked. Can we do a shade meeting with the planning commission?
I would certainly defer to our legal counsel to answer that question. I've not had that asked either.
The open meeting requirements and the shade meeting exceptions are the same for PC as well as it would be for the city council. So the reason for going into that meeting would have to be disclosed for me to answer that question. There, based on the 2 exceptions that currently exist, this doesn't fall on anything that I think would readily fall within an exception.
Enough for me. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Okay, so I'm hearing that there's at least potential for some consideration of language that might address trees, a traffic study, and perhaps workforce housing. It seems to me this is just my inclination that those, to the extent we're considering conditions, I don't see them necessarily going with the land use, but rather going with planning and new development, if that makes sense to staff. But it's up to my fellow commissioners as to, so we can approve, we can disapprove, or we can approve subject to conditions.
Typically, you can't condition a land use action, so it would be tied to the PUD.
Yeah, I mean, that does make sense. Really. So do we have any thoughts about conditions?
Of course. I just feel rushed. I think there's a lot of information here. There's a lot of good discussion tonight. I believe there's been progress by the proponent on the development of the plan. And I think the two gentlemen that spoke about, we need to work together and figure out the best for the city, for the people that live here and are here now, not for the new 600 or whoever's coming. So I would like to consider, I'm not making a motion, but I'm making a discussion for postponement, push it off.
Well, and I'd just like to add that I find it actually sort of refreshing that we have an applicant who's willing to do a traffic study at this point in the process, look at the trees, and look at workforce housing when our comprehensive plan really doesn't even make them do that. And it says affordable housing is good. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't set the standards, it doesn't. So, I mean, I think we're maybe focusing on the same thing in that we have a developer that is creative and willing to work with the city, but for that reason holding them up when they're willing to begin those studies, including the traffic analysis, immediately. It seems more reasonable to me. We're simply advising. We're not the ultimate decision maker. So that, I mean, that's.
I wouldn't feel comfortable approving anything until we have that information. It gives all your power to them. Why would you want to give up your power? It gives everything to the developer. I want to see the information. They knew that this information, I remember a year ago, I think I was there. They talked about traffic being an issue. They talked about these things. I know it doesn't have it in the comp plan, but I mean, if these were issues that the community, the whole point of the community coming together and talking about it was to hear the issues, to hear the problems. So when they present it, they have that information.
Well, it just seems to me that if the planning department needed it, we should have had it before now, before it comes to the planning commission. It's not just the planning commission, you know?
Sure. Yep.
You know, and I'm saying that wearing my planner hat. But it's kind of up to us planners if we have, you know, kind of, you know, specific additional questions to bring them up during the many months that have gone by. That's
I'm
just.
not even sure what specific additional questions I have, because I have not read every page of this document. I read some of it right here with Steve talking, starting on page 21. I mean, there's a lot of material here. And I have this for.
I would agree.
Ms. Ireland, when was the last time we had a big project like this come through with this amount of capacity?
As far as number of units,
Yeah.
probably would be the Blue Water on Beach Boulevard. I believe that's around 300 apartments. I don't have that exact number in front of me, but that's the last one I can think of right now. For a residential project, that would be comparable.
What year was that?
2013, before I got here.
So, open to motion.
I'll make a motion to postpone for 30 days.
And, okay.
And if you want to add something to my motion, if you want to add that we would ask that the applicant address the 3 items that you just spoke about, we could add that to the motion as well. And then we could get a traffic study. I mean, the motion doesn't have to be just make the postponement, but I think that we all want more.
I agree with Margot in that this is a work in progress and that there's, you know, this is something that they're willing to work with us on, and we are in a housing crisis. You know, what's going to happen when this lease expires at the end of December? We're going to have the dilapidated Kmart situation on our hands. So I don't see any reason to defer and hold back when the applicant is willing to work with us.
I do, because this is not the first time that we have continued this. This applicant has come here with the same situation before. They've changed it and they've approved it and they're working with the city. Now, I think this board wants to work with them, but I think that we need more information. I think we need the traffic situation assessed. I also think that we need the workforce housing. I understand that Mr. Deveneaux had said there will be some. What is some? 2? What is it, 25? You know, we need to have some sort of concrete answers, especially because City of Jacksonville people, residents, they need to know that as well. So I think if we postponed it and then requested in the next 30 to 60 days to get a traffic study, find out how many workforce housing we're going to have, and what was the third point?
Trees.
And maybe a tree survey, as the planning commissioner had stated.
And a better use of recreation area. What I think.
Could we restate the motion, please?
I'm going to make a motion to postpone this for 30 to 60 days, whatever the applicant can do to move forward for a traffic study on the area and to how many workforce housing units will be available, and finally a tree survey that would need to, which trees do be true and which ones go and not go.
I wonder if my colleagues would accept a deferral for one cycle to the next meeting.
But we can't guarantee that they can get those things done in 30 days. 30 days goes by quick.
I would recommend that you defer to a specific meeting time.
October 24th and November 14th.
About November 14th.
Then I would add November 14th to my motion.
Why don't we ask the applicant? I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, Mr. DiBenno, I think we need to hear from him.
Yeah. Again, listen, we really appreciate the opportunity. Those of you that know me know I almost always accept the deferral to keep working on something. But in this instance, the issues that we've discussed and that have been identified are all ones that with the exception of the traffic study, that we're prepared to deal with tonight. We're not going to be able to get a tree survey in 60 days. That's just not realistic. But what you can do is add a condition that we save as many trees as possible that are healthy along Beach Boulevard. We can work on that, absolutely. The traffic study, we can get done by October 17th, so presumably, we could get done in time for October 24th. The problem with that is that your staff doesn't have a traffic engineer, and so I'm going to come here with my traffic engineer, and you're going to get the traffic study on October 17th, and you're going to be asking questions of a traffic engineer without benefit of any information on your side, and so now that just leads to another deferral. So my recommendation is that you take it up, you do the best you can, you make a recommendation to the city council, and you let us keep moving on.
But the postponement wasn't just for you. The postponement was for the board because of the massive amount that we've got. Dave said he would like to continue it.
If you were
That was also, it was kind of two reasons.
Yeah, if you're asking me what day I would choose, I would ask for October 24th, but I personally don't think that, you've got a professional staff that did a ton of work on this, and I think they're in a position for you to be able to rely on your experts and the information they've provided to you. But that doesn't mean I'm not willing to continue working on it. It's just, in this case, we've spent an exorbitant amount of time making revisions and changes to meet the code, and your staff has agreed with us that we've met the code. We really would like to keep going forward. But if you ask me what day to go to, I would say October 24th, and we'll come back with as much information as we can, to address those four concerns at that time.
Madam Chair, is the motion still on the floor?
Yes.
Okay, second.
Hang on. I believe the motion said November 14th, so do you want to amend that? Okay. We got a motion in a second, so.
So you
We have a motion in a second.
and please restate the date.
Within November 14th.
Okay, so we just need to be clear. So if we vote no, then we would need another motion as to how exactly we do it.
Well, we need to vote.
Understood. I just want to make sure that, we don't do this a lot, so. Okay, so I guess we need a roll call.
I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what I'm voting on. Should we restate what the motion is?
The motion is that we postpone for 3 issues and for the board to be able to look at the massive amount of paperwork that we received. Although we do have city planning commission that has commissioner that has approved it, we still want to look forward because we represent the city of Jacksonville Beach.
But what's the motion?
So the motion is to postpone this until the November 14th date. The applicant will list how, like, he'll do a traffic study. He'll try to get some sort of a survey for the trees, and then list how many apartments or rental units he'll have for the workforce.
Madam Chair, for me?
Yes.
In regards to a tree survey, that's something that would be required of them when they come in for site plan approval, but way later in this process. It's never something that's required this early on. Again, it's something that's done administratively, internally. We look at all the trees on site, what they're proposing to remove, what they're proposing to get rid of, and what they're proposing to actually plant new. So if you are going to have some type of condition based on landscaping, I wouldn't recommend having them do a tree survey. It's just too soon in the process.
And I will withdraw this section of the tree.
Yeah, because that comes way later if they actually get down to that point. So, but something related to trees, I think, a condition, and maybe it's when it actually is going to go to council, a condition that as many trees are preserved as possible on the site, or something along those lines would, I think, be more appropriate in this regard. If that makes sense.
I think the biggest item is the traffic, right? So and we don't have anyone on council that's a traffic expert. I mean, what's to say he just goes find the traffic expert that he likes, and then he brings him here, and then he says, hey, the traffic looks good.
Yeah, there's a
Motion and a second on the floor. So we need a roll call.
Yes, it would.
Colleen White,
Yes.
Justin Lehrman,
No.
David Dahl,
Yes.
Emily Duffer,
No.
Margaret Marvin.
No.
So that means we're still in the posture of the matters before this board. It was not deferred. So if I could, Mr. Lerman, so a traffic engineer is done by a licensed professional engineer who stamps his seal on it. It's just like somebody's doing a survey or a topo survey or a lawyer signing a brief and sending it to the court.
Okay. I'm not familiar with
Yeah,
it.
no, it's not something that somebody can, well, certainly someone can just make it up.
Yeah.
But the engineers, I'm sorry?
That's new, we just lost that.
No, I know, but I wanted to explain the traffic engineering concern that he had shared, which is a professional engineer who's a traffic engineer certified, who works at a big civil engineering firm, England, Sims and Miller, ATM,
Sure.
is who would be
That makes
preparing
total
it.
sense.
So,
I do think it's important for us to highlight the roads that are important to us, because for us to say do a traffic study, you know, you already have the FDOT from the Beach Boulevard, you're like, okay, what else do you need? I think we need to provide that information to you.
right. I know, anyway, Madam Chair, I just, I can continue talking about the traffic. What we're talking about now really is the traffic study methodology, which typically that's handled between the staff and the applicant, which I've already told our traffic engineer to be ready to do, you know, talk with them tomorrow or whenever they're available.
What was the other date you wanted, October 24th?
October 24th is the day, if you made me pick, that would be the day that we could be ready by, yes. But
I'll make a second motion to postpone and to have the traffic report and the possible amounts of the workforce housing, and then postpone that until the 24th.
Cindy Robinson, procedurally, ma'am, we've just voted down the deferral. We can't keep bringing back a failed motion for, outside of a motion to reconsider, just to keep repeating a motion that just failed is considered.
The motion that I put on in front of us was for November, this is for October, so it's a different date, and it also doesn't contain all three items.
I understand. I think in substance, I'm just kind of rest on what I've said. I'll sit down and you guys proceed as you see fit.
Okay, I'm just going to say one more thing, again, wearing my planner hat. So there's willingness to provide a traffic study, but we're hearing from staff that the I think I'm hearing from staff that they're not necessarily sure what they're going to do with the traffic study because there isn't someone who's a traffic engineer on staff that could evaluate it. I think I heard that. The other thing that I am concerned about is that we don't have any kind of standard for what we could ask for with workforce housing, because our comprehensive plan says affordable housing is a good thing and we should support it, but it doesn't give us any guidance whatsoever as to what to ask for. So we have an applicant who's willing to consider it, which I think is extraordinary, and boy, would that send a wonderful precedent. But holding them up, I don't understand where we're going to be, other than having read the documents in more detail. That's the only thing that I'm seeing as relevant.
Read the document.
Read it.
We still have a motion on the floor, though, right?
Yes, we do. Do we have a second? I'm not hearing a second.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Colleen White,
Yes.
Justin Lerman,
No.
David Dahl,
Yes.
Emily Stouffer,
No.
Margaret Murray.
No.
I'll go ahead and make a motion for, give me a second
I
here.
have a question. Can we set the workforce housing standard as a condition? Say if we were to do 10%, 60 to 120% of the median income, which I think is similar to what other counties have had success with.
For the rezoning application, I would recommend that you, if you're gonna put a condition, that council looks at that as well, because I don't know that he's willing to commit to a number necessarily, and we can't require it anywhere in the code. It doesn't say we can require it, so if that is something that is a condition, I would recommend moving that forward to council and then allowing the applicant to have those discussions with their client and so forth. And then council will also obviously have those discussions on what their request would be.
Madam Chair, procedurally, I think you also have to adopt the land use amendment. Recommend approval of the land use amendment first before we can get to the conditions.
You're right.
So as Mr. Lerman's thinking about his motion, I would recommend that we talk about the land use amendment first. We can't put conditions on it. And so for purposes of continuing the discussion about the rezoning, my thought would be that you would take a vote on the land use amendment, assuming that there's a vote in favor of recommending approval of the land use amendment, then you go to the rezoning and you start talking about conditions. And we have a very detailed idea on affordable housing that's consistent with state statutes that I'm happy to share at the appropriate time, but it would be in the context of the rezoning and not the land use amendment. So item number one, I think, is the land use amendment. Assuming you get past that, then we can start talking about conditions.
Okay, so do we have a motion specific to the land use amendment, which is basically up or down, or I guess another date change?
I'd just like to speak to the overall development of this and land planning. The area that they have this in is on a major thoroughfare. As it is now, it's a little hodgepodge in the land use. And what they're doing is smart development. You have a commercial center to the right. When you have the high density residential there, those tenants are going to utilize the commercial center. It's almost as if you're creating a little city. I know where I live right now, I'm in deep South Jacks Beach. I rarely leave my house because I can walk across the street to Whole Foods. I can go to Cruisers or whatever it is. And I think that this is smart planning versus adding something that is commercial and increasing the traffic. And
Said it's not your neighborhood.
Brennan,
Yes.
David Dahl,
I'm going to abstain.
I don't think you can, but I'll leave that to the attorney.
Yes, sir, you are required to vote unless you have a conflict that's required by statute.
No.
Colleen White,
Yes.
Emily Stouffer,
The motion's to deny, correct?
to deny.
No.
Margot Moran,
No.
What happens in the case of a standstill? Shouldn't be, right?
No, should be 5 votes.
So let's, someone make a motion for it if that's what you want. You want to sit here?
Well, can I just clarify, so there's no way to, handle this item on October 10th? Both items or whatever, to defer just one cycle? Our next meeting is
We
October 10th.
made two motions for that, I think we can't.
Those are two different dates, this is a different date.
Change the language of just the
Can
county.
we defer it one cycle?
I guess my question would be for what purpose? You know, would the purpose be to have more time to look at it?
Yes.
Because if you're gonna just delay your vote, that's one thing. If the purpose is to collect more information that then you would review, that's kind of another thing. Does that make sense? If it's just to defer the vote, to allow more time to look at the application and then have your recommendation ready to move forward with council.
I can tell you what I want to do. I want to look at this in more depth. I want to look at the transportation element. I want to look at the comp plan element. I want to look at the case law on it. So that's what I would like some extra time to do.
Again, I really appreciate the conversation and the dialogue. So if we were able to get some level of traffic data, I don't know how to have it done by October 10th, but we can try. My question would be, would there be any objection if we have the vote on October 10th? And this is probably putting you on the spot a little bit, Madam Council. Would it be possible if we were to achieve success on October 10th at the Planning Commission on a recommendation of approval, would we be able to go to the City Council the next week for the first reading on October 17th? Procedural.
I don't think you have enough time to advertise that properly.
We don't.
So that's a challenge as well.
So just to keep the record complete, I think what she said is, just into the mic, is that there's not enough time to advertise it properly before October 17th, which I understand. I mean, I understand the desire to read the information, but I'm not gonna have any additional, I won't have a completed traffic study, I don't think, by October 10th. I'm already making the commitment, not talking to my traffic engineer or my client. So I'm 2 weeks is tough. I know 3 weeks we can get it done, but 2 weeks is really tough.
And what date would 3 weeks be?
3 weeks would be October 17th, which is why what I was saying is, you recommend approval, I'm just making this up, you recommend approval with the condition that we have a traffic study prior to final approval by City Council for their consideration. And then we would have that on October 17th, which is, again, similar to the tree survey. It's 8 months premature in the typical development process. I'm not discounting it or saying it's not important, I'm just saying it's very atypical, and we're willing to accelerate it, but I guess we're trying not to be penalized for giving all the additional information, and we're hopeful that we can keep moving. If you want to talk about affordable housing, I'm prepared to talk about that, just to outline the issue. Okay, I'll just stand by that.
That's a kind offer, Mr. DiBenau, but you're the one that brought it up, and it's a hot issue all over the state, all over the country, especially in this state. So we do need to talk about it sometime, but I don't think that's crucial to this.
Well, I do just want to add that I think whatever we need to be be setting up here will give the applicant some assurance of an ability to move forward
So,
if this is considered on another date. So if Mr. DiBenale is willing to at least put something on the table now, that might help us to ensure that the next meeting is definitive for us.
I'm confused because we made a motion to push it off for a month, that didn't go through. A motion to deny, that didn't go through. So the only motion left is to accept it with conditions at this point.
Well, I'm sorry, move approval of the land use, which you can't condition,
You're
and
right.
then take a second vote
100%
on the
right.
rezoning.
You're
Sorry.
right. Yeah. So someone needs to make that motion, otherwise we sit here all night. Yeah. Continue. It's not going to be me because I already said deny.
Well, but just to clarify, we made motions in relation to specific dates, if I'm not mistaken.
You can make another motion for a different date, because that is not the same motion as the first.
Understood. Okay, so we still have the ability to.
You do have the ability to.
I wasn't sure just because our attorney went up and said that we shouldn't be doing that, but we can again.
That was her suggestion.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we're dealing with the land use. And I guess the only thing we can do about, since we can't put conditions on land use in the sense of conditions that would be associated with the comprehensive plan, the only thing we need to look at, vote up or down, or change in date for our action. Do we need a motion? Yes, and I'm the chair and I don't make motions.
Motion to approve.
Can I second? I second.
Colleen White,
No.
Justin Lehrman,
No.
David Dahl,
No.
Emily Stouffer,
Yes.
Martha Murray.
Yes.
So just coming from our attorney, because I tend to listen to attorneys, what do we do in this kind of situation where a motion has already, to accept that? I'm just curious what the precedent is. There's usually legal,
Well, I
what typically
don't
happens?
think relative to one action, I've seen so many motions that have failed. You know, when we first spoke about the deferrals, the substance of that conversation had been around just deferring in general, although the data had been used. And the reason I said the second instance that it was improper because when you keep having motions that have been denied or that fail, is presumed to be dilatory in purpose. I'm not saying that's the case here, but you can't really kind of go through the calendar day by day and save the motion because now you've chosen another date for the deferral. At some point, there has to be a decision that the motion to defer has failed, and you move on to a different motion. Now, we're now two deferral motions, one motion to deny has failed, one motion to approve has failed. We still have applications that really don't have any actions by this body. So,
I guess Sandra, Heather, and Christian, we just had a motion and a second to approve, and it failed.
that's correct. So, you
I
still
think a
have,
decision's been made.
but you had a motion to deny that's failed as well. So really, these applications haven't moved substantively one way or the other. There was a motion to deny, it failed. A motion to approve, it failed. Now, I suppose there's one.
Well, I
Approve
think
with
the motion to
conditions.
deny failing still requires some action to occur.
Right. And so
The
the
motion
motion,
to approve failing, I do not think requires any further action to move forward. No.
well, based on the conversation, and I think technically you are correct. But based on the conversation that's been going on, theoretically, it could be a motion to approve with conditions. So under normal circumstances, I would have said a motion to deny should have just simply been a motion to approve, maybe see if it succeeded or didn't on that vote. rather than to state the motion in the negative. And since we've had this broad range of discussion, really on opposite spectrums on these applications, I hear what you're saying. I'm not quite prepared to say there's not one more motion available, but I think technically if I had to say we can cut it off, I would rest on the point that you just made. But I simply, based on just listening to the conversation, I'm not sure if that's where the conversation actually stops. But the motion to approve and the failure of that does kind of stop everything from a legal standpoint if there is really no further consideration to be given to these two applications.
Well, can we go back to considering, given that there was almost consensus that there should be a deferral, can we go back to another date? And perhaps it's October 17th.
I think I would rather rest on the statements and the representation that has been made through Mr. or Commissioner Sussin. The application to approve has failed, and that is the motion that brings the most finality to this. If you look at all of the motions, each one barely failed. It was a 3-2. So the deferrals were no greater in being advanced as was the motion to deny, or in fact the motion to approve. So we don't have any kind of weighted decision in that regard. And so again, the finality based on all of the motions that I've heard tonight rests with the motion to approve, and I simply offered the motion to approve the condition simply because the conversation or the discussion around these applications didn't lend itself immediately to that outcome, but it is the perfect outcome given the length of the conversation.
Madam Chair, if I may make one comment. I've been doing this for a long time. I've never had this fact pattern, so I'm not really sure what the result would be from a third party, but in the spirit of compromise or trying to get this in a posture that people could be productive about it instead of maybe being at odds. The October 24th date that I offered before is the date that we would still ask, and I think you might have to have a motion to reconsider by somebody on the winning side to bring it up. But
we already had the October 24th meeting.
no, I understand. I'm just offering it as a way to bring the conversation and allow this commission to exercise their discretion. And if they don't want to, that's okay. Then we'll continue the conversation with City Council either way. So I'm just offering it as a suggestion.
And I actually think it's a good suggestion in that we were willing to consider it before. I think we now know where everybody stands. I wasn't of the impression that we were saying this future land use change could never go forward. That's the choice we have. And I don't think we should be saying, I don't think we should be saying that. And I don't think that's what we
already voted. That's what the vote's for. You already voted. This is embarrassing for our city.
This is, I think the news isn't here.
You already voted.
Madam Chair.
He's here.
If I may,
Yes.
so the
You're
planning
recording
commission
this, ma'am?
is making a recommendation to city council for these votes. That is what you are doing. So if you have voted not to approve this, that is your recommendation to city council. You need to make a vote on the planned unit development rezoning request as well tonight. And if your recommendation for that is also denial, those are going to move forward to city council. That will be your official recommendation to them as they consider and make a decision.
And is there any procedural way for us to reconsider?
No.
That's
what you're here for now.
You're gonna need, I think you were,
A motion to reconsider is proper before the end of this meeting, so anyone can call for a motion to reconsider any previous vote that has been taken in this meeting, provided the motion is made by someone who was in the prevailing side of the vote. So with respect to the motion to deny, someone who voted against the denial can make the motion to reconsider. Anyone voting in support of the motion to deny cannot make that motion to reconsider. So you have to parse out your votes to figure out which one you want to ask the body to reconsider and have the person who voted with the prevailing side of that vote, whether it's a winning or losing side, whether it's voted in favor or against whatever was pending before the body, have the person who voted on the prevailing side to make the motion to reconsider. Once that is done, you get a second for it, and it's up or down, do you reconsider it? If that succeeds, then you bring back exactly the same motion that failed in the first instance, and you take another vote on that.
So another permutation here might be that we ask for a deferral of the rezoning, so that nothing is transmitted to the city council yet. If we were to ask for that deferral of the rezoning, that to a date certain, like so October 24th.
I agree with that. And that'll work because that'll get you time to do what you need to do, give us time to read what we need.
And so then when we come back on October 24th, the first order of business would be to have a conversation about the land use amendment and the rezoning, for you to be able to look at the traffic report and have a conversation about that, have a conversation about affordable housing, whatever the issues may be, attainable housing or whatever the issues they may be. And then I think you would be in a position procedurally that someone would still have to make the motion to reconsider the land use amendment. But all of those details that would give your lawyer time to figure out who needs to make that determination. So again, right now we would have a recommendation of denial on the land use amendment. We would ask for a deferral on the rezoning and until a date certain. And so I would ask that we defer our land use amendment, our rezoning until October 24th. But I want to make sure that that Attorney Robinson doesn't have another thought, because I don't want to get us in a bad procedural posture. I'm trying to accommodate and respect the decision that was made on the land use decision tonight, but then also give us time to talk about the zoning. On the other hand, if you want to talk about the zoning and get it done tonight, I'm happy to stay and have that conversation as well. And then you can transmit a complete package to City Council.
Aren't you withdrawing the second one?
No, I'm not withdrawing it. What I'm saying is I'm offering to defer it until October 24th.
Okay.
And if that is well received, then we can stop the conversation tonight and subject to Ms. Robinson if she has any other thoughts on the process.
But that would be up to you because you're the applicant, right? So.
Well, it
He's
is,
offering to defer.
again, I'm trying to offer it.
He's offering to defer.
Oh, okay.
I'm just offering it.
And
as
that
a-
would stop any
So we can all just
transmittal
accept his
to,
offer?
that would stop the transmittal to the council.
Well,
So it would give us time.
I'm making sure that that's what would happen. I'm trying to figure out a way to help, to give more time for the conversation, but respecting your decision on the first issue.
So if you, okay.
And I'm just asking for Attorney Robinson if she has any other
Heather, I'd
thoughts.
like your opinion on that too. We talked about this a couple of times, and it seemed like if the first one failed, it seemed like there was no need to consider the second one, but
One needs the other.
No, we have two votes scheduled, and we had two separate public hearings. The staff and the applicant made joint presentations, or presentations that covered both applications, but the intent was to treat the applications separately. So we do have one more matter that needs to be handled.
Now, may I ask, do we have and perhaps this is moot, but do we have the ability to reconsider the future land use change on the 24th, should the rezoning, the planning development be heard?
We don't need to,
So-
because he's going to defer it.
He's actually moved to
No, I'm just
defer.
asking whether this commission has any ability to
Yeah.
take another look as they get all their questions answered on the planning and development, to take another look at the future land use change.
Right, so I
And
think
the answer
based
is no,
on,
it's no, I get it,
based
but-
on the procedural rules that are currently in place, the reconsideration is proper in the meeting in which the vote was taken, okay? So today's meeting, or tonight's meeting, is the opportune time to reconsider any of the votes here that were made tonight which failed. following the guidelines that I suggested earlier.
So can I just ask my colleagues, does anyone who voted for denial, is anyone interested in reconsideration?
Oh.
I'm just confirming. All right, thank you.
Okay.
So I guess, yeah, but are you, well, have you, is it official? Have you requested
So-
referral? And do you need to talk?
So again,
I need better training because I wish I never made that motion for in the negative, and then we would add the other.
I'm not sure where that's going to get us.
on the reason.
Madam Chair, is the floor open for a motion?
I just would like this conversation to be over before we, so there's no surprises.
Sandy, can I ask a question? Practically, they're submitting a recommendation to council on both items. How would a split recommendation go? In that they would recommend,
Without a recommendation.
I'm sorry?
Basically, you would forward on to city council without a recommendation.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay, so do we have a motion, and perhaps a motion? No, we need to take action on his willingness to defer to, October 24th. So do we have such a motion? And second. For PC 13-21.
So just be clear, we cannot make a motion to approve zoning because the land use failed.
You're making a recommendation, so I think to Sandy's point, that if you recommend the land use as a denial and the zoning as an approval, it's really no recommendation.
Right.
Well,
It's no recommendation.
that you can recommend approval of the rezoning with lots of conditions, one of which includes that the comprehensive plan amendment be adopted. So you can do anything you want, really. You have the realm of possible.
I just find it odd that the applicant is telling us what we can and cannot do.
Yes.
Yeah. Please.
It's just,
I think probably the cleanest thing at this point would just be to vote up and down
Yes.
zoning.
Yeah.
Vote it.
Because I don't know at this point what your recommendation to council would accomplish since you voted down the land use.
A motion to approve rezoning.
You have a second?
What was the motion?
Motion to approve the rezoning.
The second. Isn't it contingent on the land use?
Yes, but we have to.
Not in your case because you're making a recommendation. It would be in council's case. But you're offering a recommendation to council, so you have to vote on both.
I mean, I second to approve, if that was the motion.
Yes.
Justin Lehrman, David Dahl,
Nope.
Emily Stouffer,
Yes.
Martha Murray.
Yes.
Heather, when's the date of the council?
What is it?
October 17th and November 7th are the scheduled dates for council.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a planning department report?
I'm pretty sure I mentioned this at the last meeting, but you have a joint meeting with the Board of Adjustment and city, and you guys with the consultant for the Land Development Code and comp plan review on October 27th. So that'll be at 6 p.m., most likely in this building. If we determine the crowds are large, we may move to the Parks Department building over at Sunshine Park, but most likely it'll be here. That's it.
Any further discussion?